Okay, showtime. Good evening, and welcome to the February 21st, 2019 school board meeting. This meeting is now in session. Please stand while our Career Center Air Force JROTC cadets present the colors. Thank you. You may be seated. And tonight we have 4 recognitions. First, the Wakefield Chorus will perform the Black National Anthem. Pam Farrell, Visual and Performing Arts Supervisor, will introduce the group. And board members, please join me in the front row.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the school board, Dr. Murphy, executive leadership team, and guests. Tonight, in celebration of Black History Month, we will hear a performance from the Wakefield Madrigals. Lift Every Voice and Sing, also called the Black National Anthem, was written as a poem by James Weldon Johnson and then set to music by his brother John Rosamond Johnson in 1899. It was first performed in public in the Johnsons' hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, as part of a celebration of Lincoln's birthday on February 12, 1900, by a choir of 500 school children at the segregated Stanton School, where James Weldon Johnson was principal. James Weldon Johnson wrote the words to introduce its honored guest, Booker T. Washington. In 1919, the NAACP dubbed it the Negro National Anthem for its power in voicing the cry for liberation and affirmation for African American people. James wrote this song because he felt sad because of blacks did not have freedom, so he wrote a song about it that shows how he felt and how they all felt. Tonight, both Johnson brothers would be proud to hear their song performed by our Wakefield Madrigals under the direction of Mr. Nadim Nader. Please stand for Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Stormy the road we trod, bitter the chasing rod, but in the days when hope unborn had died, and with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sung. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought to us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on, let us march on, let us march on till victory is won. Let us march on.
I think the piano adds a nice accent. I guess they don't agree. Not at all. It looks like we really did it live.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was part of our celebration of Black History Month. Now we'll have a presentation recognizing an example of great teamwork by teachers and parents at Carlin Springs Elementary School, and I invite the team members up to introduce themselves.
We got together and we came upon academic parent-teacher teams, which is also called APTT, and then we established it at our school and have now called that teamwork.
I think it is definitely making a difference because it has everybody working together, students, parents, and teachers focused on one goal, using data and best practices and research-based learning experiences to help students close academic gaps. And so one thing we heard very clearly last year was that the biggest concern parents had was that what would happen if the next year they didn't have teamwork. And so it's something that once parents have this experience, they don't want to let it go.
So this approach that we've been starting here, our teamwork approach, is very different than other parent nights that we've had because the parents are really learning specifically what it is they can work on and how. So parents are learning activities that specifically align with whatever it is that the teachers have decided to be a foundational skill at their grade level. So for example, parents might be learning exactly what they could do to work on multiplication facts.
You see the parking lot outside? It's like packed. Like I had to park across the street. It's like so many cars, and it's a great feeling that all these parents are willing to stop what they're doing for one night, every couple months, and then seeing what their child is learning and then how we can help at home.
They inform us about what actually they have been doing in the class, which we get it from the kid, but not so much. We cannot leave kids back home. So it's better we bring him here, but they go in their own activities and they want to meet their friends and all, and we can concentrate on our stuff.
Me gusta Teamwork porque, primero, porque puedo conocer directamente a los maestros de mis hijos, porque puedo ayudar a mis hijos mejor en casa con las sugerencias que me dan los maestros. Yo tengo hijos 3, diferente grado. Pre-K, me gusta porque puedo ayudarle a mi hijo a que aprenda el nombre de cada letra y que cuente los números. De Ashley está en 3er grado y me gusta, le puedo ayudar en casa a resolver los problemas de 3er grado de matemáticas. Bárbara está en 5º grado. Me gusta Teamwork porque papá y mamá podemos ayudarle en casa a resolver los problemas.
Often our parents would really think, I don't know what to do at home. But the way that this night is designed, we kind of turn it back onto the parents in a way. Like we're showing them a game, but then we ask them, how might you change this at home? What are some ways that you already work on this at home? And then they start realizing like we are teachers in the home.
The first teamwork, you set a goal to help your kids so they can reach that goal. And then the next teamwork, you see that they reach the goal and then you do a bigger goal for them and then it keeps going up and up and up.
And then making that SMART goal really helps them think about, okay, so how many times a week can I practically even fit this in? So they really start thinking about that very carefully and then can make a really achievable goal.
I think the reason teamwork is so important is that it's not just bringing teachers and staff members and parents and families together, but it's bringing them together as partners, and they're really working shoulder to shoulder in supporting student success. And so teachers are learning more about our children and their families, but parents are also learning how best to support their children as learners.
Good evening. I'm Margot Bowers, teacher at Carlin Springs Elementary. School Board, thank you for allowing us to share with you about academic parent-teacher teams, what we call teamwork.
Hi, I'm Lauren Ferraro, the math coach at Carlin Springs. Thanks again for having us.
Teamwork is a unique approach to family engagement that consists of parent and teacher collaboration to drive student achievement through analyzing data and community building. We know our families are their children's first teachers and have the capacity to integrate academics into their home environment. Teamwork provides families with the tools and strategies that tap into that capacity. The model is grounded into the notion that schools can thrive when families and teachers work together as genuine partners to maximize student learning inside and outside of school.
At teamwork events, families have dinner together, build relationships with other families, and establish a network of support. Data is examined so that parents are aware of their child's academic progress in a specific foundational skill. Families learn appealing, standards-based activities to engage their children in learning at home.
Families leave with a deeper understanding of the foundational skill, along with all the materials needed for at-home application, the confidence to support their child in acquiring that skill, and most importantly, a network of support within their community.
Hi, I'm Carol Sabatino, our community school coordinator at Carlin Springs.
And I'm Mary Claire Moeller. I'm the literacy coach and instructional lead teacher.
Carlin Springs is a comprehensive community school, serving as a hub for families since 2003. The model strives to form strong school, family, and community ties, including opportunities for shared leadership. The teamwork approach contributes directly to achieving the goal of our community school strategy. Over our 3 years of teamwork implementation, we have collected evidence that demonstrates the approach increases our levels of family engagement and student achievement. Last year, an average of 42% of our student body had a parent attend their level teamwork meetings, which exceeds our average rate of highly engaged parents we have had over the last 3 years as measured by our community school evaluations.
Now, in our 3rd year, we are implementing teamwork school-wide, pre-K through 5th grade. Our experiences at each teamwork event have further ignited our passion about this model. Parents report they feel more comfortable coming to school and knowing how their children perform academically. They leave classrooms charged with energy and a renewed sense of partnership with the school. As a result, we've seen increased academic achievement. Students whose families attended all 3 teamwork sessions last year made much more significant progress in their foundational skill as compared to those who did not. To conclude, Rosa Briseño, Family Engagement Specialist with the Department of Teaching and Learning, will share how this initiative fits into the larger picture.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to commend the Carlin Springs team and to thank them from the bottom of my heart because they have been doing an extremely amazing job and doing very hard work championing and leading this strategy in Carlin Springs and for us as a school system. They are what I call model face trailblazers. And they are helping us to transform the way that we partner with families to have greater impact on student learning. APTT, or Teamwork in Carlin Springs, is, as they noted, a nationally recognized strategy that parents and teachers have found very valuable. And what is more important for us is that it addresses directly one of our strategic plan goals, posted in the walls, building partnerships. What you just heard and you just saw in the video is how strong and mutually supportive partnerships looks like in practice. We are very excited to have other schools that are embracing this approach. Kenmore began piloting it with small groups of 6th and 7th graders last year, and it is actually holding an APTT meeting tonight as we speak. This year, we also have Barcroft Face Trailblazers who are trying APTT with their 3rd grade students, and Hoffman Boston with their VPI classes are also forming academic parent-teacher teams. Their experience has been very positive so far, and they are gathering data about its impact. So we are having additional body of evidence on what difference does this make. Special thanks to all our school principals who have championed and embraced this strategy. I also would like to thank Dr. Teresa Lewis, secondary specialist, for leading this work at the secondary level. Kate Coburn, the coordinator of federal programs, for supporting our work to build the staff capacity in this area, which we will continue to be doing next year, and especially to Dr. Natras for her vision and leadership that you are providing for engaging our families in student learning in powerful and meaningful ways. Thank you. My office and the Department of Teaching and Learning intends to continue to support and grow this strategy in the future. To conclude, I would like to invite the team of Carlin Spring to have a picture of this very special moment with our school board members. So thank you, everybody. Yeah, where do I go?
Yeah, you're staying in the seats. We have two more presentations. Thank you all very much for the presentation and for coming this evening. And now I'd like to introduce the president of the County Council of PTAs, Maura McMahon, for the next recognition. Maura?
Good evening. February is School Board Appreciation Month. So in honor or in recognition of School Board Appreciation Month, February 2019, on behalf of the Arlington County Council of PTAs, I would like to thank each of you for your service to our children and to our community. A community's elected officials can face incredible demands and challenges. As public servants, you are required to develop equitable policies and to make difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions on behalf of the entire community. You may have faced decisions or choices you never imagined you might have to make, or perhaps you've come to realize that making certain decisions is not as easy as it seemed when looking in from the outside. CCPTA would like to recognize each of you for your time, your dedication, and your willingness to serve, even during this time of tremendous challenge with seemingly endless growth, competing priorities and opinions, limited resources, and a variety of influences reshaping our community. As you know, Arlington leaders don't make decisions in a vacuum. As much as you may sometimes wish otherwise, there are many community members willing to render opinions and provide input on even the seemingly smallest of matters to help you form decisions that need to serve the whole system. CCPTA is committed to offering you a countywide perspective when you solicit feedback, to support and assist you in your work to engage the broader community, bringing together diverse groups of parents and educators, and to support the entire system and every child it serves. We are fortunate in Arlington to have a board that invites that feedback and welcomes our questions and recommendations. We at CCPTA appreciate and value your accessibility, the time you take to attend our monthly meetings, and your willingness to face multiple engaged representatives from across the school district in one room at the same time. This year, as a token of our appreciation, CCPTA is donating a book of each board member's choosing to his or her liaison high school, with one exception. As liaison to the Career Center programs, Dr. Cannon's selection will be given instead to the Arlington Community High School Library, as the Career Center currently does not have a library of its own. We are distributing your books to you this evening so that you may sign and dedicate them as you wish. Then we will see that they're distributed to your respective high schools. While you are receiving your books from our Vice President, Catherine Novello, I would like to take a moment to recognize Ms. Melanie Elliott, School Board Office Manager. Ms. Elliott provides critical support to each board member, to staff, and to the community at large. It is no small task to coordinate the schedules of 5 busy board members and to prepare and manage all board meetings and their frequently accompanying lines of passionate speakers. Not to mention her myriad of other duties, ranging from oversight of communications, maintaining the Freedom of Information Act, facilitating the honored citizen recognition, all the way down to her own thoughtful extra details, like leaving pitchers of ice water and bowls of chocolate ready for the chair's advisor meetings that begin after her day is ended, and I particularly appreciate. And she does it all each and every day with a calm demeanor and a genuine smile. CCPTA thanks you, Ms. Elliott, for your service to the Arlington community and for your dedication and commitment to ensuring the best educational experience for our students and families. And last but not least, we express our gratitude also to Claudia Mercado and Julianne Jones for all the work they do to support the day-to-day functioning of the board office. It is their work that enables board members to devote more time to direct communication and engagement with parents and communities, both one-on-one and at countless meetings. We thank you all for your work to fulfill the collective vision and mission of Arlington Public Schools, to support high-quality education for the children of Arlington. Thank you.
Maura, thank you very much. We're all humbled by the recognition from the CCPTA, and this is a great time to tell you how much we value CCPTA's work and collective involvement and interest and help that we're getting from them. So let's just keep that great collaboration going. Thank you again. And that was a great segue into our final recognition tonight, and that is for School Board Clerk Appreciation Week. And Melanie Elliott is not just the office manager here, but she is the school board clerk, and she is ably assisted by the deputy clerk, Claudia Mercado, and also Julianne Jones, who is our receptionist. But the three of them do you cannot imagine what a phenomenal job they do to keep us afloat. I know it looks easy, you know. Yeah, it looks easy. Yeah, standing up here looks like a smooth, professional, well-oiled machine, you know, without any hiccups. But that's because that office pretty much has adopted the duck model. On the surface, smooth, unruffled feathers, but paddling like crazy underneath. And we all appreciate it so much. I cannot tell you how much Melanie's work and the other office staff function to keep these board meetings moving along and all of the rest of the scheduling and everything else she does for not just keeping the meetings moving, but also board members' presentations and meetings and schedules. So I want to say thank you to her and to Claudia and to Julianne. We'll have a little presentation of our thanks tomorrow in honor of School Board Clerk Appreciation Week. And let's just thank her and give her a round of applause. All of them. Thank you. And I think we're taking a photo, aren't we? We are? Where'd Maura go? Did Maura leave? Maura left? Uh-oh. Sorry? No? Gone? Okay, well, we'll Photoshop her in later. We can take a photo with Melanie, however. That's right. Why don't you stand right here in the middle?
And you should get your flowers. So you have to sign these and give them back to Maura? Yes.
Give them back to me and I'll.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Melanie will take care of it.
Yep.
Melanie takes care of everything.
Just curious, I mean, it's kind of like, what books did they get? I don't know. It is, but I don't know what books they asked for. I don't know what book Monique asked for, I don't know what book Barbara asked for.
Okay, thank you all. And we are now at announcements. Tomorrow, February 22nd, we will hold a closed meeting at 8 a.m. in the school board conference room. On Tuesday, February 26th, we will have a work session on equity, inclusion, and transgender policy development at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. On Wednesday, February 27th, there will be a closed meeting at 7 p.m. in the school board conference room. March 8th, there will be a committee of the whole meeting at 8 a.m. in the board conference room. And on March 12th, the school board policy subcommittee will meet at 2 p.m., also in the board conference room. Board members, do you have any items to announce?
I do.
Tanya?
Yes, I just wanted to announce the Real Food for Kids 2019 Culinary Challenge. It's going to take place March 2nd at Hayfield Secondary School in Alexandria. And what's really cool about this, it's from 11 to 1 p.m., and it's an annual culinary challenge. I'm trying to find the right, so this is what happens. I'm looking for the paragraph. Wait for it. It's exciting. Drum roll. I don't have it. Thank you, Dr. Cannon.
Larger font helps me a lot.
I know, but I didn't have time to prepare my announcements, but I really wanted to announce this. Ken Moore and the Career Center are going to be participating in this contest. And what it does is it brings together hundreds of students in middle and high school career and technical education programs to create exciting new lunch options for thousands of area students and influence school nutrition professionals to offer healthier choices. And in the past, we have included these recipes in our own lunchroom cafeteria. So it's very exciting. Our kids are going to be cooking. If you can go, you should go. They're going to have a public tasting in the awards, and it's from 11 to 1 on March 2nd, 2019. So I think that's very exciting, and I'm hoping next year we have more schools participating. I'm not going to be in town, but if anyone goes, tell me how our children's food tastes, and I'll go try it out in the cafeteria. I also wanted to announce that the Barrett female students were featured at a State Department video for the Week of Women in Science, and it was very exciting. They got to see themselves in this video. It was through the Discovery Lab, so I thought that was some exciting news to share about Barrett Elementary School, who is one of my liaison schools. So those are my announcements. Thank you for your patience with me.
Okay. Nancy?
Everybody what my book was, because I know you're dying to know, and I'm hoping that will kick that off with everybody else, since we didn't have a chance. The book that I picked was the autobiography of William Allen White, which probably most people haven't read, but this was recommended to me by my high school English teacher, because he knew I liked to write, and he was a foremost journalist and documented the industrialization of the United States from Emporia, Kansas. So I recommend it to anybody who's thinking about being a journalist, which is why I'm suggesting it be in the library at Washington Lee. So there you go. Knew you wanted to know.
Thank you. Barbara?
All right. Well, I have an announcement, but I'll go ahead and share my book as well, which is going to Arlington Community High School. It's Fermat's Enigma by Simon Singh. He's an awesome author who does a lot of really well-written mathematical stories. And I see Mr. Admazili has read. You've read it? or you know the author. Fermat's last theorem was something that everyone seemed to think looked probably true, but nobody could actually prove it. And so it goes through the history of all the folks who've tried to prove his theorem. And I know it doesn't sound exciting, but it's really an amazing journey through the history of intellectual thought. My announcement is the formation of Team School Board. Right? Have you all signed up yet? And we've got some of our wellness people here. Our employee assistance program has a wellness challenge starting on Monday. And our office staff, we hope. Mr. Chair, are you going to sign up? You're going to be part of our Team School Board? We're going to exercise, and we're going to do mindfulness activities. And we encourage everyone to join us because wellness matters, not just for our students, but our staff as well. Mr. Chair, are you committing to Team School Board?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, awesome. 100% participation.
Are you done? Okay, thank you. Over here. Monique? No? Barbara?
I can't get that on. Okay, thank you. So I was happy to choose a book that highlights one of our own civil rights heroes who grew up right here in Arlington, Joan Trumpeter Mulholland. And her son wrote a book about her and her fight during the 60s for equal rights. And she actually sat at lunch counters and encountered racism and watched as African Americans encountered racism for the fight for civil rights. And some of her clothing is actually on display downtown at the African American Smithsonian Museum. And so I wanted to make sure all of our students knew that right here living within our midst, we have a person who fought for civil rights, who was not African American, who was a white woman. And I hope that they're inspired to stand up for what they believe in. And so that's why I want to make sure that this would be in the library of our high schools. And the high school for me will be H.B. Woodlawn.
And I just want to clarify that it was the International Day of Women and Girls in Science, and the video is titled Girls and STEM, an Exciting Combination. The book that I chose was How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent. We were asked to pick a book that had an impact on us. And this is a book about a family who, an immigrant family who lives in New York, and the stories of four sisters. And the reason I picked it is when I read it, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I had been having this, what I thought was a very unique and challenging experience, and my 3 siblings had been having their very own different, significantly different experience that was just as challenging and trying, and fitting in a world with 2 cultures, or fitting in this one world with one culture, living 2 cultures simultaneously. So it's a very fascinating book. I loved it, and I picked it for the high school. It's a high school read because I made sure that it was age appropriate with our librarian, so thank you, Mr. Luttrell. And it's going to be going to Yorktown Library. And thank you, Maura and the CCPTA, for giving us an opportunity to add a little tiny, tiny piece of ourselves to the system.
Thank you. So I guess I'll start with my book, which is The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman, who's one of my favorite nonfiction authors. And this book is about the few short weeks leading up to the outbreak of World War I and how the entangling alliances amongst Europe's powers dragged all of Europe into the war, even though nobody really wanted to do it. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating read. When the story goes, when President Kennedy first came into office, he obtained a copy for all of his cabinet members as a caution that to watch out for these kinds of alliances and commitments that would have that kind of negative effect on their actions and on the future. So this book is going to be resident in the Wakefield Library, since I'm the liaison there. And I want to echo the thanks of my colleagues and thank Maura and the CCPTA for this idea. And let me make some announcements about my liaison schools. At Oak Ridge Elementary School, the Yes Club planned and implemented a program to donate food to the Arlington Food Assistance Center, AFAC, that was otherwise going to be thrown away after breakfast and lunch. They got approval from Food Services as to the eligible items for donation and started the collection with 4th and 5th grades and are pushing out the collection of leftover food to the rest of the grades this month. Yes Club members made a video, which was shown on the school news, modeling to students and staff how the collection and donations would work. Food is collected at the end of each lunch and refrigerated until it is dropped weekly at AFAC. In 6 weeks, they have donated close to 700 pounds of food. Donation amounts will continue to increase as they roll it out to the rest of the grades. So congratulations to Oak Ridge for that bright idea. At Kenmore Middle School, this past Friday, school board member Barbara Cannonen visited with the Bright CS Girls Coding Club, that's computer science, Girls Coding Club at Kenmore. Students are part of a grant initiative designed to get more female students, particularly African-American female students, involved with computer coding. The grant was written by APS parent and former Kenmore School Planning Chair, Dr. Ryoko Yamaguchi. The club will meet over a series of Fridays to introduce the girls to computer coding and career pathways associated with computer science. Tonight at Kenmore, over 190 Arlington students from 4 middle schools will be playing their hand-built cigar box guitars on stage at Kenmore as part of a concert celebrating local Black history and blues music. The concert is a culminating event for a Virginia Humanities Changing the Narrative of Race in Virginia project, funded by the Kellogg Foundation. Students have been building their own guitars from cigar boxes, learning about local Black history, writing lyrics set to blues music, and performing the music on their guitars. Wilma Jones, a fourth-generation Halls Hill resident and historian, visited with students and shared stories from her neighborhood. And Rick Franklin, a local blues musician, actually lives in my neighborhood, has been teaching the students how to play 3 classic tunes on their guitars. The project has been led by Joe Yucha, founder and director of Building to Teach, a Train the Trainer program for hands-on math instructors. On Monday, March 4th, Kenmore will host the Scholastic Art Award exhibition, a juried showcase of works by Arlington students in grades 7 through 12. The ceremony begins at 6:30. The exhibit will be on display at the Central Library from March 1st to March 31st. And finally, next week, Kenmore begins to host Padres Comprometidos, a weekly parent workshop presented by Edu Futuro. Edu Futuro is partnering with Kenmore to present a curriculum designed to reach Hispanic parents who are interested in building better connections to their children's school. And that concludes our announcements, I believe. And now we will hear Dr. Murphy's announcements and updates.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein, and good evening, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed yesterday's inclement weather day. I know our students took advantage of that as well as our staff. But as a consequence of that, we missed some of our evening activities. So I want to recapture some reschedules and also highlight some of those evening activities that were unfortunately missed. And the first I want to start with is our Virginia Preschool Initiative, often referred to as VPI, which was supposed to have its information evening last evening. It has, though, been rescheduled, and thank you to the early childhood team for the reschedule for next Wednesday, February the 27th, and it's going to be at Carlin Springs Elementary. One thing that I want to point out is VPI registration is underway now, and this is our full-day pre-K program for 4-year-olds whose families meet income eligibility guidelines to enroll. And this is something that we cooperate also with the Virginia Department of Education. The program follows a curriculum that is research-based, developmentally appropriate, and has shown to increase academic and social success for our students. And Arlington Public Schools is a leader in the state in offering pre-K programs. And so consequently, we see this as an asset to many of the programs that we have here in addressing opportunity gaps and starting students off in the right way for school. So hopefully pass the word and encourage folks to come out if they are interested in enrolling in VPI next year. I also want to recognize the work that our food service folks do. Next week is National School Breakfast Week from March the 4th through the 8th. And in collaboration with, again, the Virginia Department of Education, as well as the United States Department of Agriculture, we are celebrating this nutritional excellence. We see breakfast here in Arlington as something that's very important to start the day out with. And I want to really commend Leslie Peterson, but also her food service team, Amy McCluskey, and all of our food service workers. We have seen an increase this year in breakfast participation of over 9%. So thank you to all our school leaders and folks that make that available to our school. Starting the day out right with breakfast gets students going and on a positive track. I also want to congratulate both the counseling teams from Jefferson and Gunston for their recent receiving the RAMP certification, which stands for Recognized ASCA Model Program. RAMP's designation or award aligns with the criteria of the ASCA National Model, recognizing schools for their commitment of delivering a comprehensive, data-driven counseling program and an exemplary educational environment. 2 other schools in Arlington have also been recipients of this recognition, Nottingham Elementary as well as Wakefield High School. And I do want to make one distinction here about these 2 schools, and that is calling out Jefferson's, whose counseling program scored so high on every aspect of the application. Jefferson is one of only 3 schools nationwide to earn a recognition as a school of distinction. And I know that we have some members of the team here who are seated in the front here, so thank you to you folks centrally for the support that you bring. Laura Newton, Pam McClellan, we do appreciate that work. Kind of dovetailing with that, I am aware that right now students at the secondary level are beginning to sign up for courses. And so there's a lot of discussion that is happening out there with our counselors and our families and our principals. And my encouragement this evening, which has been in discussing with principals over the last several weeks, is this is really the time to really begin to promote and set expectations high for students, that they stretch themselves to some degree. But I want to clarify this a little bit. We want all students to be challenged, but also challenged within reason. And so one of my encouragements has been to students over my career is stretch yourself in an area that you might excel in, or stretch yourself in an area that you think you have a certain interest. There also needs to be a balance, and we've talked a lot about balance in our lives. And I know that oftentimes, as part of the course enrollment process, families may ask about a student enrolling in a certain or particular course. And they may, if they feel very strongly about their students enrolling in that class, please speak with your counselor about it. Our teachers give recommendations, and we want to make sure that we recognize their interest also in well-being of kids. But families know their kids best. And so if you see that your student can excel or achieve, and it's something that is part of our strategic plan, that we encourage you to speak with the counselor and make sure that if that's something that you want to pursue, that you have that opportunity out there. This is something, by the way, that I'm going to continue to talk with school staff about, and I think it also sends a very positive message. Number one, we have high expectations for kids. We want them to aspire and reach a little bit higher, and we believe that all kids can be successful with the proper supports in place, and we have excellent staff here to be able to make that happen. All right, I want to shift gears for a little bit. We've got a little bit of an update on some of the winter athletics as we wrap up the winter sports. I'm going to just highlight some of these and congratulate each of the teams or each of the schools across several teams. And I want to start first with the Wakefield Warriors and recognize a young man who's on the Wakefield wrestling team, and that's Lorenzo Rajon Aruvalo. And he was the state champion winner. And this is the first state champion winner in wrestling that Wakefield has had in 50 years. I also want to recognize a team member of Vincent Galang, who was a first runner-up. So congratulations to both of those individuals. This evening, by the way, the Wakefield boys have continued to advance to the semifinals, and they are playing right now over at Wakefield. So we'll continue to get updates through text messages and hope for the best with them. I do want to also recognize the Washington Lee girls gymnastics team, who won the Liberty District and Region championship. They placed 4th in the state, and last week, as they were leaving town, they got a police escort from Arlington County Police to the border as they headed out of town. And then finally, at Yorktown, congratulations to sophomore Tori Husk, who set a national high school record in the 100-meter butterfly, and she also won the 50 freestyle. Congratulations to Tori, but the entire team, and you can kind of see an array of the different achievements that our students have accomplished over the winter season, and we wish them all the best and want to congratulate them for that. The other event that unfortunately was postponed last night is our celebration of Black History Month here in Arlington, and as part of the preparation for that event, we asked students who were identified by their staff of models of excellence in their community and in their school. And so we'd like to highlight that video here for you so you can see some of the outstanding students that we have. Sorry about that, Booth. You'll have to re-key me.
I celebrate Black history throughout the year by showing how excellent we can be in our communities. I do community service through JROTC, and I also teach my younger sibling, my sister, who's 7 years old. I teach her about how excellent we can be through our history and our family, and also throughout the community.
We go to a carpenter shelter at Washington, D.C., and we make food and we serve it there, and we drive around and go give homeless people clothes and blankets and toothbrush.
To me, it just means being proud to be Black in America, and also reflecting on my ancestors and my history in the United States.
How I celebrate Black history through the year is me and my mom look at a movie about Ruby Bridges. One thing that I learned about Ruby Bridges is that she's the first Black African girl to go to an all-white school.
We just talk about all the history, and it's important because kids like me get to learn about it.
I like to think about how many African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, even before that, worked hard to make sure that our future generation now didn't have to face the same injustices that they did back then, and we live much more free life than they did.
I have Black history all around me every single day. They really push me to really focus on my education, and they instill in me that, even though you are African American, you do have disadvantages, you can still work hard and get to where you're going because you have the ability to.
To me, being a model of excellence just means that the younger people, the younger generations can look up to you, and even the older generations can be like, I trust this kid to like lead the way for his peers and people below him.
It means being kind and nice to people, who you know or who you don't know, and always working hard.
There's a lot of people who are very inspiring and who have enough courage to try to speak up and to try to change things that they don't think are right.
When other people are doing the bad thing, I just like do like the good things, and then they will like follow me.
So I feel like being the model of excellence is just it's a good title to have, you know what I mean? Because not everybody can do that, and to me, being a man of color is like showing that I can compete with anyone else.
I think it's good that we learn how, no matter how different we look, we're all very similar inside. We all have emotions, we all have feelings. No one should be left out from another. Everyone deserves to be the best.
I think people should always like be themselves because you can never be the best person that you can be unless if you be yourself.
Really, I'm not the smartest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest, but I try my best in everything that I do, and I really, any kind of passion I have, I definitely push for that and use a lot of time for that. So really, if I have to give any kind of advice or any kind of guidance, it would just be give 100% in everything.
So students of APS, I mean, see, you try your best in school, try your best in extracurriculars, make yourself the best version that you can be.
So join me in thanking those students for being wonderful role models, and also thanking them for being leaders in our school and community. And thanks to AETV who captured all of that for our celebration of Black History Month. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm going to switch gears here to where we are with the budget process. I just want to bring to everyone's attention that I believe the county manager is going to be presenting his budget coming up this weekend, and the county board is also going to be setting the real estate tax ceiling, so something for us to watch very closely in preparation for my presentation of my budget next Thursday, a week from today. This will be my proposed budget, and we've got a series of work sessions that follow here, as well as public hearings, both on my budget and the school board's budget. And then we'll move to the board action on May the 9th in adopting the 2020 budget. One thing that I want to make everyone mindful of is the school board throughout this process and throughout the various work sessions asks a series of questions. We gather those questions, staff responds to them, and then we post them, and people then have a sense of what those questions are and what the responses are. So I know Ms. Peterson and her team, as well as all of the executive leadership team, are working very diligently to get all of that information finalized for next week. Just some other important dates: summer school registration, March the 1st. We have elementary school parent-teacher conferences with an early elementary release on the 7th, and then no school for elementary and middle on March the 8th. And then March the 13th, we have early release day, and that will be for all students. So you may want to mark your calendars for those. Hopefully, we'll also have the weather here begin to cooperate. So I want to just provide a quick overview of where we are with the school board action plan. As you recall, there are the 4 different areas that make up the plan, and the first has to do with policies and policy revisions. You can see the policies that have been adopted to date there in the light gray, and I believe this evening we are going to see several additional policies that the board will consider as information. By the way, I'll just do a little bit of a lead-in. We'll see the graduation, promotion, and retention bring all of those together this evening for the board to look at them sort of holistically, and then we'll go ahead and ask questions around those. We also shared this with you, and I'll highlight, I believe Mr. Goldstein made mention of it. We have another work session coming up next week on Tuesday, February the 26th. on equity, inclusion, and transgender. This is going to be an opportunity for us to engage and have conversation around these policies as we begin to shape them. But I know Dr. Natras has spoken to the timeline that we have here as we move forward with each of these policies in each of those particular areas. I would encourage folks, we do live stream those work sessions, and so if you're interested in either coming out or watching live stream, we'll have that on Tuesday evening. I also know that over the last several weeks, there have been a variety of questions that have come out as a result of options and transfers. And I know the planning and evaluation team, along with the Welcome Center, is working to update information about that. I'd just like to highlight some of the aspects of where we are with options and transfers, and as a result of some of the boundary changes we have just completed. And I'll really start with the secondary lotteries for options and transfers has closed out. The wait list will continue through May 1 for transfers, and that is for 1 year of options. We also have elementary applications for option lotteries open through April the 15th. There are no elementary neighborhood transfers, and we also, if there is a case where families want to appeal, and they can appeal, we've outlined the process there, with where they can go on the website. We will respond to the appeal, and then Ms. Johnson will also follow up. So I know there's been a lot of questions about, well, for instance, we have no elementary transfers. Though if a family wants to make an appeal, they can proceed to do that, and then we'll look at that in consideration if there is room available. But I do want to make note with the elementary boundaries as just an example. We have a lot of moving parts right now, and there's a lot of transition that is going on. So if we, if there is an appeal, it may be some time until we can kind of sort some of that out to make a particular adjustment with that. But I think we're open to trying to accommodate families the best we can, but we're also sensitive to the fact that there have been a lot of moving pieces that are going on right now. All right. With operational planning, we've got a number of changes with building and program names. One of the ones that still is underway is Drew, and that's for the full neighborhood school. So this will be something that will be coming to the board here very shortly in the next several meetings for both information and action. We've got a little bit of an update, and I'm going to ask Dr. Natras if she may want to just walk through. We had a work session recently on the pre-K grade 12 instructional program pathways, and what's outlined here is a schedule for how we're going to proceed and move through the end of June with this. So Dr. Natras, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. So at the work session on February 12th, we talked about some of the goals for this work and really focusing on the vision for our instructional program pathways. We are working to define a variety of entry points into our instructional programs. So this impacts both options and neighborhood schools. We are really working to have pre-K-12 articulation where appropriate and having a very clear message of access for our families. Dr. Murphy, you just referenced the options and transfer processes that are taking place, and we want to make sure that this really helps us to clearly articulate that work. I do also want to make note that we are not including any specific school sites in this conversation. It really is the vision for what we want in terms of various programs. And so that is not a piece of the conversation. We will be working with a variety of groups. You can see here from staff groups to our advisory committees and others, and we'll bring the work forward as a school board monitoring report in June.
All right, thank you, Dr. Natras. I know the board has expressed recently, since adopting the strategic plan this fall, to get updates as far as where we are with the particular goals and what achievements have been accomplished. Remembering the plan is just about 90 days old. But we wanted to institute a process and put that in place so that folks can kind of see where we are at this present time. This is, by the way, something that we do with our schools. They have 90-day plans. It allows them to make adjustments and have some agility with what's happening in our classrooms. So I just want to bring to your attention that we have posted this online. Some of the things that we've been able to address in this short period of time, we do respond to. Others will probably be more responsive to as we end up the year with some of the data that we're gathering on that. But you can see that this is online. You can go to strategic plan, and you can see kind of what the status of our strategic plan, division strategic plan, is at this point in time. This evening, as far as capital initiatives, we're going to have the Ed Center reuse project coming forward, and that is for action. It's under the schematic design, and you can see sort of the history of what's transpired and the work that's been accomplished to date. And then finally, I know we've provided updates for the board as far as where we are with the various projects, capital projects that are underway with our 5 new schools opening. I just want to remind everyone that they can go to the A to Z listing and put in design and construction. And we are continuing to update that information with where the project and status is. This morning, just as an aside, I had an opportunity to walk up to the Stratford building, and there was, hard to believe, but there was construction work going on this morning in light of our recent snow, so that was encouraging to see. I also know that the board at the last meeting expressed interest as far as where we are with the Career Center and most specifically Arlington Tech. I want to let you know that we are still pulling that information together. I want to be able to provide that to the board, and I think we can bring that back at our next meeting or post that information once the board has had an opportunity to kind of review and look at that information. Staff has been working on pulling the various CIP information that the board has taken action on over the last several years, and we're also looking at some of the funding that is currently available as well as future funding that's really out in forecasted for future CIPs. So I know you're interested in getting the information. I'm interested in getting you all of the facts, and so we have that to work off of, and I hope to be able to provide that and make a presentation coming up here at our next meeting. But that's all the information and updates that I have for tonight. Mr. Goldstein, I don't know if there's any questions or clarifications that you'd like for me to bring.
Thank you. So I just have 3 kind of things I just want to highlight from your announcements. The strategic plan update, we'll be seeing that on an ongoing basis every, I guess, 90 days. That was the plan when we adopted the strategic plan. 90-day check-in points, so we could see, how progress was moving along.
Right.
We're not necessarily going to see that at every meeting, but.
No, but I also want to just clarify, there are some things that we just don't have the information for at this point in time.
Oh, right, clearly. I don't expect that the entire plan is, moving, every cog is moving in it, only 90 days after we've adopted it. It is a 6-year plan. But, we're committed to the 90-day check-in look, and so I'm just letting people know that roughly every 90 days we'll be, checking in to see how, things are progressing. The second is the continuing monitoring of the IPP, the Instructional Program Pathways. We will be seeing that at your announcements at succeeding board meetings.
Yes.
So that we can kind of keep, keep track of, how that's going along, because it's got a fairly close, June deadline. And I think there's a plan afoot to adjust the schedule of the budget work sessions. So just want to alert people to kind of keep an eye on that. I don't think we've quite figured out exactly the whole budget work session schedule.
Yes, and I know we were in the midst of that today, so my presentation this evening may not be fully representative of that, but we'll provide an update and we'll post that information. It's just, I believe it's going to wind up being a small adjustment if my memory serves me correct.
All
But
right,
thank you for pointing that out.
For folks who are going to, tune in or show up at next Thursday's budget presentation,
Right.
We'll probably have that info then about what the schedule of the budget work sessions will be.
Right.
So those are my only highlights and clarifications. Board members, do you have other?
Good clarifications.
Sorry?
Good clarifications.
Thanks. Other comments or questions, clarifications? You want to go first? Sure. Okay.
So first, Dr. Murphy, I have to say, we all have to focus. The Wakefield boys need 7 points right now. They're trailing by 7.
Yes,
So
I saw that.
let's all focus a little bit here.
Okay.
Channel some energy that way. The budget work sessions, do you mind quickly pulling up the slide? Just want to point out that at least at the point that this slide was created, we had not defined our topics for several of those work sessions. Could we at least find out when we might have those topics filled in, again, so that some of our advisory committees and interested stakeholders can keep up with us?
Yes, and the way that we did this last year, I think, was very effective, and I believe the board is interested in doing that again, is to look at this by department. So when I bring my presentation next week, we'll have that arrayed, and we'll lay that out, and we'll have that finalized. There has been some back and forth here recently, and so I know we'll be updating this as well.
So your budget presentation next week?
Yes.
We'll have those dates. Great,
Yep.
Thank you.
Nancy?
I have several questions, Dr. Murphy, but I want to start with saying thank you for commenting about the course course option selections. I've been getting questions from parents of students in special education who have been told that they don't get support in advanced classes, which they do depending on the need of the student. And I want to make very clear that that would be our expectation if it's appropriate for that child in every situation if it's appropriate. So I'm glad that we're able to clarify that and continue to clarify it. I know some of our schools do a great job with that, and others need some support in making that happen. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to add, and there's been conversation with all of our principals at both the secondary levels, and I know Mr. Bird, who's in the back, has been involved in that, as well as Ms. Natras, as well as Ms. McClellan. So I think we want to have a dialogue. We want students to excel. We have high expectations for all kids, and we want to see them succeed, and that's been the overriding message.
Thank you. But we do, getting to some of our strategic plan goals, we do have disproportionality in the upper level classes.
And you know what?
I can't help but point that out and hope that we can address it, because the vast majority of special ed students do not have intellectual disabilities.
Right, and
So
unless you address it head-on, there's not going to be a change.
get there. So thank you very much
Yep.
for doing that.
Yep.
So thank you for all of that. My other comments are, and we don't have to do this now, we had a long conversation at the last meeting, and I would ask that this get clarified on the website, and for you perhaps, if you'd be willing to clarify at the next meeting. I have been getting questions as a previous Jefferson PTA president, as I see we've got also a previous Jefferson PTA president here, about bus service for students who are transfers. Unbeknownst to me, we seem to have changed a policy related to that, or not a policy, but a practice.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be clear, because there are upper-level students from throughout the county who have bus service to both Jefferson and Kenmore. Now, we seem to not be offering that anymore. And I have the letter in which Jefferson became a countywide school and program. Kenmore already was. And we have done a marvelous job at diversity and supporting diversity across the county by having those be countywide programs. I know we have a crunch, but we seem to have changed a practice without overtly communicating it, which is very, very confusing to families. And you can have a family who has an 8th grader and now a 6th grader, and they're being treated differently. And this board was not aware, we were not aware of it, and it's a practice. So I just think we need clarity, and explanation for people so that they understand what's happening. So if we could please do that, it would be really, really helpful.
Okay.
Okay? So I have two more. On the Career Center, I went back to the CIP, and I'm just going to ask that when we do get an update, we have by 2021, 250 seats, total of $18 million. And I'm really going to want to know what happened with that and what our plans are to house our students. And I understand that right now it may be some consideration of relocatables, but I'd like to know what alternatives we have. So I just want to give a preview because I think that was a shock to parents, and we owe them an explanation because it deviates from what was in the plan that we actually voted on and acted on in June. So I hope that your update will include that. And my last comment is about the budget. I think the community needs to understand that when the county board sets its tax rate on Saturday, that is the highest it can go in terms of funds for both the county and the schools.
Right.
And I'm going to speak as one board member now. We have, up to the most recent briefing, we had a $24 million gap. I know that you all have been working feverishly to close that gap, but I hope that the county board, in their action, will allow us to have the flexibility to come to them to ask for what we need. And for me, that is up to a 2-cent increase. So I'm putting that on the table because I don't know if that seems like a lot of money to me. And I know we're working really, really hard to not have to do that. But as one board member, I would like, because we can't get our budget out before they set their ceiling, I want the community to understand that we're in this odd situation in which they set the ceiling and then we put our budget forward. And we constantly get in this gap. And with our schools expanding by 1,000 students a year, opening 5 schools, the stress and the work that we're asking our staff to do, I just can't help but to take a minute to say, please let us breathe, let us have the opportunity to ask for the support we need without an arbitrary ceiling that's set prior to our expressing that need. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because I don't think the community understands the bind we get put in once that vote is taken.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, clarifications? Tanya?
I just want to follow up on something Ms. Van Doren said. I'm the liaison to Jefferson Middle School, and I did receive an email regarding bus transportation for transfer students. And so when you bring that back to us, I just want to be very specific in the clarity. I responded that our policy states we do not provide bus transportation to neighborhood transfer students. However, I recognize what Ms. Van Doren is saying, that because we have an countywide option element to Jefferson, my understanding is per policy we do provide bus transportation to option students. I think that is where the confusion lies, and it would be helpful to understand in schools that have both components, how are we managing that?
Right.
Is it separate? And so I just need that clarity because I'm getting those questions. So we've had this discussion before, but I now understand how to word that clarity.
Right.
We have neighborhood transfer students at Jefferson and countywide program students at Jefferson, and per policy, they receive different services. Where are we landing? So I don't need an answer today, but that's the answer that we're seeking.
That's the question.
That is the question, and now I'm thinking, did I provide per policy, I provided the right answer, but what is going to be the practice considering this unique element of having both in one school? So I just wanted to make sure that in that follow-up we get clarity. And then I did want clarity real quick on the wait list for options and transfers. I understand that if you're a neighborhood transfer, we have a wait list through May 1st, but I thought the second bullet said option for a year. I just want to clarify that. Does that?
Dr. Natras, maybe you can help me with that.
Yes, the transfers will stay on until May 1st for that waiting
The
list.
neighborhood transfer
The waiting list
application.
for options programs roll into the 2019-20 school year.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I thought it said. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for parents. If you applied as a neighborhood transfer, then your wait list ends May 1st.
Correct.
And you will have to reapply the following school year. If you are applied for an option program, your wait list is through the following school year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Goldstein, could I just illustrate something here just really quickly based on what Ms. Talento said? And I know this may be a little bit of history here, but I also think it's important to kind of point this out. And Ms. Van Dorn may be able to assist me here with my memory. But at one point in time, we did not have the transportation option for Jefferson County-wide. And what we had is we had additional unmet capacity there. And so by providing the transportation, we were able to remedy one of the capacity issues that we were experiencing at other schools. We progressively added students to that school, and at the time the principal did a very nice job, as the principal's doing right now, the new principal's doing right now. But we used a variety of these different strategies to utilize the seats that we had available that were in different places. So sometimes those things, we outgrow those things, but sometimes we need to keep those same strategies in place. I'm not saying that we're eliminating the transportation option, but that's how these things evolve. And you can see that across various things, strategies that we've exercised with immersion, for instance, and some of the other areas. So that's a little bit more background. But we had quite a number of seats there that were not being filled, and we were able to fill them up through offering transportation.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I just want to clarify that that was also the case at Kenmore. So it's Kenmore and Jefferson who were treated this way. Kenmore had the Arts and Technology program, and Jefferson has the IB program. And yes, it was to fill excess capacity.
Right.
But it also did a great job of diversifying the schools to some extent.
Yeah.
So that's why I ask my colleagues that we continue to consider this.
And I think also offering more opportunities, which is really part of the K-12 or pre-K-12 instructional pathways for students.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of add on my 2 cents to that, and that is that this is reflective of the growth that we've been having in the system, and then the hiccups that, sometimes come forward because, as you say, we didn't have transportation, then we did, which improved the situation, but then we had a boundary change and had never before had to deal with the ramifications of the boundary change with neighborhood students and transfer students and the busing because, the policy says something but hadn't really looked forward to, the ramifications of a boundary change. So all of this is a function of our growth, which in many, many cases, kind of throws us these curves that we're then going to have to noodle over and work out. And I think we're done with the announcements. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And now we are at the consent portion of the agenda. And before I ask for a motion, I want to note, if you're looking at the agenda, 3 consent items have been moved off of the consent agenda. So revision of school board policy on purchasing, D10.1, and the revision of school board policy D10-30 on purchasing for construction contracts have been removed, pending further discussion on those, and they will come back to us at a future meeting. And the item on extended day licensing was moved off of the consent agenda and was moved to action. That's action we'll be taking later this evening. So now, may I have a motion, please, to adopt the consent agenda? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And that motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And as a result, I'd like to announce that as part of the consent the board took the following actions. We approved the revised out-of-school time council charter. The council is a joint county and school advisory group that supports collaboration among providers and community members to provide high-quality, out-of-school time services and opportunities to Arlington youth. The board also approved 2 funding items related to Fleet Elementary School. These 2 items were presented to us for information at our last meeting. The actions tonight move available funding as needed for disbursement and do not affect the overall cost of the project. And now we are at the non-agenda portion of the meeting, non-agenda items portion of the meeting, and where we will hear citizen comment. And before I begin, I'll review our speaker guidelines for all speakers, not just non-agenda items. The school board welcomes public comment and allows comment at most regular board meetings. If you would like to speak but have not signed up electronically, you must submit a speaker slip to the clerk before the agenda item you wish to speak on is called. So for this particular non-agenda item, if you have not signed up electronically and you wish to speak, you need to get your speaker slip in now. Speakers are called in the order in which they sign up. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes, and there is a timer to help you keep track of your time. The timer begins when the speaker starts speaking, and you should conclude your remarks when the buzzer sounds. Currently, the board is exploring updating these guidelines to include direction to ensure all speakers are understood regardless of their native language. For now, if a speaker addresses the board in a language other than English and an interpreter is present, the speaker will have 2 minutes to speak, and the interpreter will have up to 2 additional minutes to translate the comments for the board. All comments should address matters related to Arlington Public Schools. Speakers should be courteous and address your comments to the entire school board. Generally, board members do not respond to public comments at meetings. If you have written comments, please give them to the clerk to distribute to the board, and we do encourage written comments. And we ask the audience to refrain from applauding, as that takes time away from our speakers. So, do we have speakers for the non-agenda item?
We do have 2 speakers tonight. The first is Ms. Stacy Snyder.
And Stacy Snyder is the chair of our Facilities Advisory Committee. And as chair of one of our advisory committees, we have removed the limitation on 2 minutes. So we're anxious to hear your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Stacy Snyder, and I serve as chair of the Advisory Council on School Facilities and Capital Programs, or the FAC. As the FAC, we are tasked with assisting in, quote, in the continuous systematic review of school facilities and in the annual and long-range capital improvement program. The council offers recommendations and suggestions to the school board on the Arlington School Facilities and Student Accommodation Plan, or the AFSAP, which includes the 10-year capital improvement plan, or the CIP, and for future funding for school facilities, end quote. I'm here this evening to speak on behalf of the FAC and to make a recommendation to you on the AFSAP. Our committee has spent a great deal of our time investigating the impacts of student enrollment growth on our school facilities. Understanding that as our student enrollment grows, the pressure on our existing facilities and the need to create new capacity increases the need to establish a planning process that responds to these needs while controlling both building and operating costs within our land-constrained county. The most recent student enrollment projections, which estimate future enrollment, predict continued growth, adding more than 6,100 students to our division, an increase of approximately 24% over current enrollment in the next 10 years. The projected deficit in elementary school seats relative to current and planned capacity is estimated to be more than 2,400 seats at the end of the 10-year period. These numbers indicate a need for short-term planning to find solutions for creating additional capacity at the elementary school level. They also indicate the need to consider solutions for expanding capacity beyond the 10-year planning horizon as elementary school students become middle and high school students. Further, Amazon's plan to bring 25,000 plus new jobs to Arlington increases our confidence level that we will continue to see substantial enrollment growth and ultimately reach the higher student enrollment projections. As the FAC, we recognize the importance of clearly defining both our short-term and long-term needs, understanding where these needs are distributed or concentrated within Arlington, and creating a comprehensive plan that effectively captures and defines those needs. We also recognize that we have reached the point where planning for school growth requires a greater degree of collaboration within APS and with Arlington County than was perhaps required in the past. New capacity solutions for APS will require additional space from and cooperation with the county to accommodate this growth. In short, we need to ensure that we have sufficient planning processes in place so that we are prepared for growth and are in the best possible position to manage and successfully respond to any growth scenario that ultimately occurs. The current APS planning tool, the Arlington School Facilities and Student Accommodation Plan, or AFSAP, has been a valuable tool for our school division for identifying needs for the capital improvement plan the following year. We see the need to further develop the AFSAP to, 1, include a longer-range vision within this plan, 2, integrate elements of existing APS and county plans from the Department of Teaching and Learning, from transportation, and the APS strategic plan. 3, create a plan that more closely aligns with the county planning processes so that APS needs can be more easily understood and met by the county. And 4, refine some elements to better define current conditions. Therefore, we recommend that the school board initiate the expansion and enhancement of the current APS facilities planning tool, the AFSAP, to include new elements and improve upon existing processes so that our short-term and long-term needs and vision for our future as a school system are more clearly defined and in a way that more closely aligns with county planning processes. Understanding that the 2019 AFSAP report will inform the work of the 2020 CIP and is due this June, we recommend that this year's report be seen as a first iteration, identifying elements that should be included or reviewed with the goal of creating a completed comprehensive planning document for the 2021 AFSAP. We recognize the groundwork laid by previous plans. Community groups and reports have investigated and recommended new ways of approaching planning and collaborative planning with the county. These include the Community Facilities Study, the Master Planning Report, and the FAC's Future Facilities Needs Report. We also recognize that to be effective, the expanded plan that we recommend will require key stakeholder buy-in from you as members of the school board, the county board, the APS departments of teaching and learning and transportation, and other APS advisory committees from JFAC and from the broader Arlington community. We have created a sample outline of an expanded AFSAP that we see as a starting point. To create this outline, we examined past AFSAP reports and planning documents from other school districts and worked with staff to identify new elements within the AFSAP that may need to be included, enhanced, or updated. The FAC stands ready to support the expansion of the AFSAP, as we have a committee established that has been reviewing common spaces, and we plan to use that information to help make recommendations on updates to the facilities optimization study and to help guide deliberations around room use specifications. We encourage you to engage in the necessary conversations to begin this process. Please know that we are committed to assisting and supporting you in creating the most effective planning tool for the future of APS. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our second speaker is Kathleen McSweeney.
Stacy, I want to also convey my thanks, our thanks to you, also to the rest of the FAC, because I know I'm the liaison to the FAC. I know how much work you guys put into this, not just discussion and planning, but also in the writing of this. So, thank you. And Kathleen McSweeney is also a chair of one of our advisory committees, jointly appointed by the school board and the county board. And again, we will suspend the 2-minute limit on speaking, and anxious to hear your comments.
Thank you, Chairman Goldstein, members of the school board, Dr. Murphy, and school staff. I'm delighted to be with you and see you again this evening. Thank you for all you do to educate our students in our community. I am here wearing my Career Center Working Group hat today, and I'm making a formal request. I've made it informally, but I'd like to make it formally to all of you, that we schedule another meeting of the Career Center Working Group to discuss some of the progress that I think APS is making on some of the recommendations that we gave you about 6 months ago. It has been 6 months since I stood before you and talked about the recommendations from the working group, and I calculate, about 6 months from the time you will be forming a BLPC and PFRC to consider the construction at the Career Center Working Group, or the Career Center site. So I am asking that we have one meeting where APS could talk to us about some of the progress you've made, I think, with parking and transit, certainly with the IPP, which does address one of the requests we also made to APS about having a community or a larger, broader conversation about the future of education in our community. And so I think, and there are some struggles a little bit with some of the success you've had with Arlington Tech, the fact that you have a very large waiting list, and are trying to figure out how to accommodate the students who will be coming soon. And I think it would benefit you as school board members, as school staff, and also the community to have a back and forth, to have a presentation and be able to ask some questions. I was heartened, Dr. Murphy, to also hear in your presentation tonight that you are going to give an update as well on the Career Center Working Group construction and costs. And I certainly will keep my ear to the ground and make sure that we invite the Career Center Working Group members to that school board meeting to hear this as well. I'm going to take 1 second and just sort of echo something else I heard you talk about that is not related to the Career Center Working Group, but as a former Jefferson PTA president, as the immediate past president of the Wakefield PTSA, I strongly encourage you to please maintain, if you can, the bus services for students who are transferring into those countywide programs, because we also have countywide programs at Wakefield. It's a great benefit to our students, and it makes those programs very strong and robust. So thank you for also advocating on behalf of those students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening. As I'm sure you know, this is already planned to be a long process, bringing the Career Center future to fruition, and it's going to involve the upcoming CIP, the past CIP, the upcoming CIP. There are multiple elements that need to interact there on the Career Center campus, and so all of that to say that we need to find the optimum time to do what you're formally recommending, having the presentation and the Career Center Working Group folks to act as a sounding board. So we still have Tanya as the liaison to that group, and I'm sure she and you and others will be speaking about how to do this. Are there more speakers? No? Okay, thank you. And we are at the monitoring item E-1. Our monitoring item tonight is on pre-kindergarten to grade 12 student supports. Dr. Murphy, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Goldstein. I'm going to turn to Dr. Natras, who's going to introduce this, and we also have a very comprehensive team that's going to talk about our student supports and how it relates to what we're doing with our strategic plan. So, Dr. Natras, I'll turn to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Murphy. And before I launch us into the presentation, I want to take a minute to thank our team. We do have our Student Services leadership team here to complete the presentation. I also want to acknowledge that we have Sarah Snyder, who is on that team, and Chris Martini and Deb DeFranco, and also Pam Farrell, who was with us earlier and had to leave, as they have been engaged in a lot of this work as well. There is quite a bit of overlap that you will see between many of the offices that are represented. I also want to thank the Student Services Advisory Committee, who is also here. They were in their meeting and have popped out to join us, and I'm sure Dr. Newton will say a bit more about that. I also want to go back to some of the conversation from earlier this evening in Dr. Murphy's announcements, where he talked about the 90-day updates for the strategic plan. One of the things that you will note across many of our monitoring reports is that we are connecting the information to the plan. And so this evening, we will be focusing on 3 of our goals: the student success goal, our student well-being goal, and the engaged workforce goal, and these specific performance objectives. So as we go through the presentation, we will be referencing the performance objectives. For example, all graduates will have engaged in at least one experience that demonstrates productive workplace skills. What you will note about some of these performance objectives is that this is the first time they've been in the strategic plan. So our goal for this year is really to collect that baseline data. So Chris Martini and his team actually did a monitoring report this fall and referenced that same performance objective and are in the process of collecting that baseline data. So you will note that throughout this, there will be some elements where we are able to say, here's what the baseline data is, here's the goal for 2023-24. There are other times where we will be saying, this is data that we have not had baseline data on before, and we're in the process of collecting that information. A lot of the measurements for success when we talk about these specific areas will be demonstrated through surveys. So you'll see reference in the performance objectives to the Your Voice Matters survey and the Youth Risk Behavior surveys, as well as to the academic performance of our students, right? If a lot of these things are being addressed, then we should also see increases in student learning. And so I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Newton and our student services team to talk about some of the specifics, but wanted to give you some of that foundation as we move through the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Murphy, Board Chair, Mr. Goldstein, school board members. We're pleased to be here tonight to share updates on student supports. I am joined by Ben McClellan, Supervisor School Counseling, and Wendy Correa, Supervisor School Psychology, and together we will provide you an update on how Student Services is helping address the needs of the whole child. And I would be remiss if I don't second Dr. Natras in thanking my Department of Teaching Learning team for being here to support us, and also our Student Services Advisory Group. They have been extremely supportive of all of our efforts, and I think they share our concern for our students and for their welfare. So I want to start by saying that the Office of Student Services is in alignment with the new strategic plan goals of Arlington Public Schools, as Dr. Natras mentioned. And we want to ensure that every student is challenged and engaged while providing multiple pathways for student success, and to ensure that every student is healthy, safe, and supported. Our academic supports are in alignment with the new strategic plan, but more importantly, they're also in alignment with the new state requirements described in Profile of a Virginia Graduate. In preparing our students to meet these requirements described in the Profile of Virginia Graduate, school counselors and AP staff will ensure that all our students entering the 9th grade in and after the fall of 2018 will graduate with workplace skills and a career plan aligned with his or her interests and experiences. To ensure that our students are meeting state requirements, school counselors will create a program of study for high school graduation and post-secondary career pathway based on students' academic and career interest that will identify work-based learning opportunities for students. The development of an academic and career plan will start in elementary school with career awareness, exploration, and the creation of an academic and career portfolio. In middle schools, students will explore career clusters with a new career investigation course. And this plan will be updated regularly every year to make sure that the courses that students select are in alignment with their career and academic goals, and will include the identification and work-based learning opportunity. So this slide helps us see what are the opportunities that we have currently in Arlington Public Schools. Work-based learning opportunities are available through, they're very specific to CTE courses and senior experiences. And students will benefit from short or long-term work-based learning opportunities such as the job shadowing, service learning, internships, apprenticeships, register apprenticeships. There's 8 different opportunities that were mentioned earlier in the fall by Chris Martini in his internship brief report. So it is through academic advising that we are ensuring that our students meet state requirements. Academic advising is the opportunity for the counselors and the students to meet one-on-one to discuss and develop an individual plan. And every year, school counselors meet with their students to review previous coursework, their grades, graduation requirements, and make sure that the courses that they're selecting are meeting their academic and career goals, including work-based learning experiences. The academic plan, which is based on career interest, it is critical to make sure that their students are selecting the appropriate educational opportunities to meet their academic and career goals, and also meet the state requirements describing a profile of a Virginia graduate. The next few slides, Pam will share with us social, emotional, mental health supports, and Wendy Correa will follow, and we'll talk about staff development opportunities.
Thank you, Laura. So good evening, everyone, again. Happy School Board Appreciation Week, and especially to Melanie for her, for your work. The strategic plan includes 2 performance objectives, number 6 and number 7, within the goal of student well-being. These performance objectives state the need for a reduction in bullying, violence, sexual harassment, and substance use, and an improvement in mental health measures and access to mental health services. The 2019 Community Report on the Status of Children, Youth, and Families is forthcoming. It contains information on these key areas and others, and informs our work within the APS community to improve the well-being of our students. So this slide contains some key action steps. You would find these topics in the community report. Tonight, we also are excited to introduce you to a reference guide that we're developing. It's almost done, but it's a repository of all of the social emotional learning services, supports, and practices that we do within APS, aligned with the tiered system of support. And so you can see our Tier 1 prevention program and all of the things that are being done at all of the schools. And so we hope to get this out really soon, but it shines a light on the work that we are doing, and it can inform staff and onboarding staff, you know, to know where they can go if this happens or this happens. And I just want to thank Kelly Krug and Dr. Natras, because they've really helped lead this and move it along and get it to the point where it is. Just to tell you what it is, our social emotional learning infrastructure is anchored in CASEL's 5 areas of student competency: self-awareness and management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. This reference document captures programs, interventions, services, and practices that are already available in APS to support student success and well-being. So it's not a new initiative, it's just capturing and shining a light on what we're already doing in the schools. It will be publicly available, and we are sharing it with staff and tweaking some comments on it. 2 things on this slide I just want to point out to you that are listed in the document, the reference guide, and shown on the slide are first, the suicide prevention program. One of the things that we learned as we were developing the document is that we had a little bit of a gap. We needed to do more on suicide prevention. So this year we implemented a program called Signs. Everybody thinks I say science, but it's Signs of Suicide. And counselors and student services staff delivered in 8th and 10th grade classrooms. Students came to the counseling office and made themselves known to us that we may not have known were struggling. And so the program was really important and successful. Classroom lessons, another thing just to point out to you under substance abuse, we do have classroom lessons that are focused on the prevention of substance use. They're consistently delivered in middle and high school and programs, and our substance abuse counselors are doing those lessons. The lessons are the same in each middle school and the same in each high school. Finally, also under student well-being is performance objective 9. We strongly believe that 100% of students are able to identify at least one school-based adult that supports their academic and personal growth on a routine basis. We know that a sense of belonging and adult support keeps students safe and engaged in school. So steps to achieve some of that within the Office of Student Services in Arlington. Students need to connect with their school counselor either during academic and career planning or when they need a supportive person to help them through a difficult issue or time in their lives. As we meet with students and learn about them, then we're better able to help them identify adults that could be a support to them or in a unique position to give them assistance. So those connections we make could be with the Equity and Excellence Coordinator, it could be with the librarian, a coach, anyone who can support students who might be experiencing an advanced class for the first time, to someone to share successes with or talk when they're worried about a test. So knowing more about the student, having access to the student provides us more information to match them with, folks in the school. So for example, when a new student who, due to his father's military travel, came to APS, he and I talked about his time playing baseball. So as we talked and looked at classes, we decided together that putting him in AP Psychology with Dr. Grove was something he really would benefit from and wanted to do, and it didn't hurt that that Mr. Grove was the coach for the baseball team. So that immediate sense of belonging and that trusted adult status that Mr. Grove had with that student was really important. So we know that when school counselors are able to build those quality relationships with students and staff through 80% of direct access, which I think is in the Virginia Assembly that they're fighting really hard to make, real, is having that direct student access 80% of the time so that we can build those quality relationships. And now I want to turn it over to Wendy Correa, who'll talk about some of the professional learning we're doing with our staff around mental health.
Hi, good evening. I do want to talk about the work that we're doing to create the environment which allows us to create the healthy, safe, and supported environment for students. And that involves working across the division with all roles to have staff training that meets or exceeds industry standards, which means even though the majority of our staff are teachers, we have folks in many roles, each of whom have their own focus and their own opportunities to support students. So we're looking at having 100% of students meet their licensing goals, but also focus on student success and well-being. In order to do that, we've set the outcome of the 100% meeting or exceeding the standards in their position, and we're going to use the professional learning framework, which we'll see on the next slide, in order to build capacity So within the Department of Teaching and Learning, one of the great benefits of being a unified department is that our student services staff liaison more and work more closely with all of the different content areas. It's been a very great opportunity for us all to grow in this. And specifically within student services, we are both providing professional learning opportunities and building our own skills as well. When we look at the professional learning, this is one excerpt, this is not the whole, as you know, the whole professional learning framework. We want to focus on just a few things tonight that regard specifically pertain to the whole child. So within these areas, some of them overlap, as you've heard earlier. So if you see in the first column there that there's recognizing and responding to mental health needs, that includes topics such as suicide prevention, addressing and recognizing the needs of special populations such as LGBTQ youth. It also includes things like mindfulness practices and trauma-informed practices. I want to highlight for you, when we talk about data and how are we looking at things, I want to highlight a few statistics for you tonight. In the area of trauma-informed practices, we collaborated with National Counseling Group and were able to provide 3 sessions on trauma-informed practices to over 200 participants in multiple roles on 3 different occasions. In the area of suicide prevention, we've partnered with our DHS colleagues to provide Cognito training, which is an online opportunity. That Cognito includes modules both on suicide prevention and on supporting LGBTQ youth. And what I can share with you tonight is that we've had over 800 staff members log in to that platform. And that means that once you've logged in, you can access the suicide prevention modules for elementary, middle, or high, or a module on supporting LGBTQ youth. So one login can access multiple trainings, but we know that we have over 800 individuals who have accessed that platform. We also have provided trainings working with, our DHS colleagues on child abuse prevention and childhood sexual abuse prevention, as well as mental health first aid, where we have over 100 participants in those initiatives. We're able to track the number of enrollments, and we also have measures throughout, depending on the format and the topic, that measure the effectiveness. So it can be in the form of a pre or post test, or it might be a post-opportunity survey. So we do have measures in place, but we will continue to grow and expand on our metrics. So going forward, we have a lot of areas that we're working on. Here are 4 things that we're focusing on. As you've heard from Laura and Pam, around the multiple instructional pathways for college and career and life readiness. Pam highlighted for us the social and emotional guide, reference guide, which is very comprehensive and very helpful. It helps us see things across the division in a way that we have not previously been able to look at them. So we're going to continue to refine that and expand it where we find gap areas. We do continue to work on coordinated prevention and services, and that internal and external stakeholders means that within the division, working with multiple groups such as counseling groups and mental health staff across the division, as well as working with our DHS and other agency colleagues. And then we'll continue to work on providing and growing our opportunities for professional learning to support the whole child. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Thank you. So will we answer any of your questions? Well, I try anyway.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you all. Board members, do we have speakers on this? No speakers. Thank you. Board members, do you have questions or comments? Yes? Monique, you want to go?
Thank you very much for the presentation, everyone. I noticed in the earlier part of the presentation, we were talking about ensuring that students have opportunities to be able to have work experiences or career experiences outside of the classroom. I was reminded that during an earlier work session this year, we heard that we may not have staff in place to really help all of our students move in that direction, and I didn't know how we might be addressing that because it's a great goal. I just want to make sure that we have the systems in place to be able to do that.
I think you're referring to the ACI work session that we had, and it was one of the recommendations actually from our CTE advisory committee. And as you may recall from that, there was a recommendation from that group to have a staff person dedicated to this work. We are currently in a place where we have our CTE office and Chris Martini collecting some of the information on work-based experiences. We also have individuals at all of our high schools collecting that information, and our school and community relations office does some of that with partnerships. And so Mr. Martini is working really closely with our information services department to try to put everything in one place first so that we can see where we are with our baseline data and then figure out who really is the point person for that work. And so we are, because of this performance objective and because of the shift within the profile of a graduate work, really focusing on where are we with this? This is kind of our baseline year for gathering all of that data and then figuring out, is that something that really can be managed within our CTE office, or do we need to have someone who is dedicated to those work-based experiences as they continue to expand?
Thank you so much for answering that, because it's a worthwhile goal, and I want to ensure that we can meet the goal. The next thing I wanted to just say is that coming off of our work session about discipline, that one of the ways I personally feel that we can have an impact there is to ensure that we have a person that every student can really relate with. And so I think even for that aspect of creating one person that a student really feels that they have a personal relationship with, I think that there could be a huge impact on any discipline issues. So that is a very worthwhile goal, and I just wanted to say that that might be one aspect of that we maybe didn't mention, but I think is important to our students. And then lastly, I wanted to ask about the guide that we're putting together. And in our discipline work session just the other day, there's also a booklet that's being put together so that students will understand what their expectations are when it comes to disciplinary issues. But I do know that our students would also love to be able to have this information, I think, so that if they're having issues, they know how to access it. I wanted to know whether or not that material will be put together in a way that students feel is accessible and understandable, and whether or not they are one of the primary audiences for this booklet.
I will say the creation of that booklet has been done by what we've been calling our coordinated prevention and intervention team, which is made up of staff from the Departments of Teaching and Learning and Administrative Services, and staff within that team are also on the discipline team that has been doing a lot of that work. So there's a cross dialogue happening, right? So that the work that's happening with that resource guide complements what's happening with the discipline team and some of the work around that. So that the messages are also the same going out. So as these documents become public, we're looking at multiple audiences for them, including our general community, who is often asking what are the resources we have in place for substance abuse or for suicide prevention. So it will be available to the broader community, to our staff team, as well as to our students. We have just gotten into, and we were hoping to have it, but we're not quite finished, getting into the formatting pieces to have it in different formats for different audiences. And so yes, it would be available to our students as well, hopefully in a form that they gravitate toward.
Thank you so much, and I think that's very important, because I think with the hard work that went into the draft of the discipline document, I felt like when we had some students who gave us some reactions at the work session, I think they were looking for something that was formatted maybe a little differently to help their needs. And so, especially if both groups are working together, it would be helpful for that information to get back so that the students will get some information that they feel they can access. And there was a question about reading a thick document, and maybe that's not quite what they're interested in.
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that you noticed CASEL was brought up at the discipline committee. So we're all aligning that together. And I did hear about the thick document. So this is only 13 pages, but we can cut it back.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Tanya?
I was curious if in any of the work, well, first of all, thank you for the presentation and for all the work that you're doing with our students in trying to ensure that they have the supports they need in this realm of work. In any of the work that you've been doing, I was curious if there's any discussion about eating disorders or self-harm. I noticed the suicide prevention and the substance abuse and trauma-informed, and I'm grateful that the LGBTQ community as well, because I know they have one of the highest suicide rates. So I'm very excited to hear all of the work that we are doing to really support the whole child. But eating disorders is a mental health illness that goes widely ignored and very well hidden, and is a lifelong disease. And it starts in middle school, if not earlier, for some of our students. And it's something that we do have in Arlington that is probably prevalent, but I don't have statistics on it. However, just by families I know who are affected by this. So I'm curious, I don't see it in any of the work. It hasn't been mentioned. I know that the Virginia Code requires us to have education on it, and we have a small blurb in our student handbook. I just don't know, as we found out at the student discipline, a lot of our families don't read the student handbook. So if you could provide me any information you may have on that, I'd be very grateful.
So I think you will see some of that captured in the social emotional learning reference guide that we were just talking about, the document that we referenced, and it is a part of our health curriculum in middle and high school. And so that is being addressed by our health teachers throughout our health and PE curriculum.
Do we have resources that support specifically that kind of issue, the self-harm and the eating disorder?
So Debbie is saying the not self-harm,
Okay.
but yes, for the eating disorders.
Okay.
Yes.
All
And
right.
that's one of the things, as we were talking about, is we've gone through the creation of this learning reference guide. We have been able to see where do we have a lot of resources on particular topics and where do we have gaps. And several of the places where we've had gaps, we have been able, because of the funding that was set aside by the school board about this time last year, to address some of those gaps, specifically around things like suicide prevention and some of the other key topics that you've seen. And so our next step as we create this guide, this is not the final version of this document. This has really come from a self-assessment that we all started doing about a year ago to see there are a lot of questions about how do we provide support for substance use, and we didn't have something that kind of brought everything together to say, here's everything we have in place for all of our students, for some of our students, and for few of our students. Now that we have that in place, we can see, oh, maybe we don't have resources related to self-harm, or we need additional resources related to X. And so with the funds that were set aside this past year, we really focused quite a bit on suicide prevention as well as on our work with our LGBTQ youth and some of the things happening with that because we saw gaps in those areas. And so this will continue, and that may be an area where we need to look for additional resources.
And I would be curious, I know in that funding that we set aside, the motion stated in working with the community and finding out what students and families feel that are concerns. Have we been able to do that? Because I think that we would find the cutting and the eating disorder something that would come up, and I'm just curious if we've gotten to that part of the request, and then also ask, the second part of that would be, and this is more of a comment, is what I found at the student discipline, our discipline work session where we looked at how we're doing discipline. The feedback that we got from students regarding resources that would be directly used by them was so helpful to understand what they need. And for something like this, I really hope that we can access our students. And I noticed you have Our Minds Matter club that we're trying to initiate, so maybe that's a platform, assuming that's with students.
Student clubs, yes.
Okay, great. So, using them as advisors as well as ambassadors for other students to really work with the student services committee as well as staff. So that's my feedback, but the first question is have we been able to engage them yet?
I would say a few things about that. One, a lot of this work was initiated because of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey as well as the Your Voice Matters survey. So we have direct student documentation and feedback and voice from those two surveys. We have also had conversations with students. I think, Mr. Goldstein, you were out at Wakefield having conversations with students, because part of what we have built into our health and PE curriculum is project-based learning, which we've been talking about across all of our other content areas. So we've started building that into our health and PE curriculum to really also make a lot of these issues very authentic for our students and to give them an opportunity to really have dialogue around them, as opposed to the traditional health class where a teacher is standing in front of the room and delivering. And so through those PBLs and some other really authentic activities, we've been engaging in student conversation about a lot of these topics. And again, trying to figure out where do we have those gaps so that we can move forward and address the needs where we need to do that. Sure.
Thank you. On this side, comments? Nancy?
Thank you very much for the presentation to everybody, and thank you to the committee for being here, the Student Services Committee. I know that you're all very dedicated to this. I've seen you at this for a long time, and I know the staff really appreciates your support. So thank you for being here for this. I think one of the big struggles with this area of the strategic plan and the work you're doing is measuring outcomes. And I'm aware of that, and I hear you're saying you're working on that. And I remember when Dr. Cannon was a liaison to the whole child group, it was also an issue that they were dealing with, and I remember Emma working on it and wondering how we ever going to start to get our hands around that. But we need to, and there are very specific measures that we can use. I'm reminded of one of my earlier jobs was running a foundation as part of an insurance company. And I often felt like if I could just walk into the board of directors and hand them a sheet of numbers, they would understand what I was doing better than if I used words. And for us as a board, when we are under such tight financial constraints, and this is such an area of keen interest and passion for us because we know our kids can't succeed without this support, we really need to know that the funds that we're expending are useful. So we do have to push ourselves to try to measure our outcomes. So what I've heard so far is, and Dr. Murphy, maybe I need to direct these to you. So I've heard that we are making a lot of efforts in their areas. There are programs, there's training programs, there's efforts to develop internships, there's surveys that we're looking at. What I'm really looking for are what are going to be your key indicators in each area. Which of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey questions are you going to be tracking? How will you be tracking how many internships or learning or work opportunities? Those are, I think we really need to have that in some, whatever you and your staff believe are the appropriate measures so that we can determine with the funding that we're providing that we're going in the right direction. So would it be a realistic expectation to say that by the time we have our next update, you have identified what those measures are, and then we can begin to see in 5 years that we're going to get to the 100%? Is that a realistic expectation at the next update, perhaps?
I think it's realistic. I think, though, to talk about the key indicators, you know, you're kind of looking at the high-level indicators that are sort of giving a little bit of a pointing in a direction of what's happening down below that. I'd like to engage, though, with the community a little bit about this and have a little bit of a broader conversation, so it's just not one particular group or me saying these are the key indicators. I'd like to get some consensus built around that. And Dr. Natras, you look like you want to add to this a little bit.
I will say that's one of the reasons that Chris Martini is here, is that he is focusing with several key groups, including his advisory committee, as we talk about the community, on how to capture this data. As I said at the beginning, we have kind of multiple departments and individuals who are collecting that. So he is working on how we're going to capture that data and report out. We also have a team that is working with DHS on the Your Voice Matters and Youth Risk Behavior surveys to pull out the questions that are directly related to these. When the strategic plan was written, we looked to those two surveys knowing that there were questions in there that spoke to these indicators. After providing it the first, or administering it the first couple of times, we've noted that we may need to do a little bit of tweaking to the questions to capture some of these things, but that is something that our planning and evaluation team, our teaching and learning team, and DHS are working on collaboratively so that we can really demonstrate these are the questions that have that alignment. The one for a school-based adult is something that we are working through that will have to be through a survey, as well as potentially a couple of other components. And then the professional learning, we actually have quite a few measures around, and we are doing a professional learning briefing report shortly that will reference some of those, and are collecting a lot of data both on the professional learning itself and then the impact in the classroom. So we're well on our way, as I said at the beginning of this, because this is our first year with some of these performance objectives, we are in the gather baseline data stages. But we, I think, have several key things in place to help with that.
Okay. Dr. Murphy, when we say we're gathering baseline data, I want to know what the data is you're gathering.
Right.
So that would be really, really helpful. And my hope will be that next year we'll actually know what that data is, so that when Ms. Talento talks about risk behavior related to self-harm, that is a question on a survey. Asking whether or not there's a student, whether you have someone you can turn to in the school, that is a survey question. We do track, we had a great explanation by Ms. Correa about the amount of training there is. That was excellent information, but that's sort of the process. So what's the outcome? So if those measures are moving in the right direction and that training is going on, it says we're going in the right direction. If all that training is happening and we're spending that money, which we should do, then we should see outcomes move. And then we should see kids, those indicators going in the direction. So I really hope that would be my hope, that next time we actually maybe see the trial of what those indicators are and what you hope to be watching, because we have some very specific goals about what we're trying to achieve. So that's my request. And then I want to reiterate again my thanks, but also, Ms. Talento provided a very specific board direction that we all supported last year regarding $50,000 to ask our families and our students what they needed. And I know that she had in mind the issues she's talking about. So I would like to know, since we're halfway through the school year, exactly what are we doing to address the issues, reaching out to families and students for their input and addressing their needs. And I think we were talking about doing sort of forums or information sessions for them. So I'm hoping we might get some information on that.
Yes, and I think we have provided a couple of updates to the school board on that, one the end of November, one the beginning of February, on how those funds are being expended. As we talked about as we were looking through and creating the resource guide, that we had some gap areas, specifically around suicide prevention and supporting our LGBTQ youth. And so a lot of those funds have been expended for things like Signs of Suicide, which is a program that we've implemented for all of our middle and high school students. Sources of Strength is another one. We've referenced the Our Minds Matter clubs that we've talked about. And so some of those are student-to-student conversations and dialogues. Some of them are staff resources to support students in those areas, but the majority of the funds have been spent on those two areas.
Okay, so I'll just make a request, Dr. Murphy. I think we also were looking for resources for families, because we've heard from parents that they need our support as well in knowing how to support their students, and to also dovetailing that learning so it's students, faculty, as well as the parents, because the parents often will be the first people who come in contact with our kids every day. So those are really my questions in this area, and I just want to say thank you again. I know this is a tough area, and the last thing I'll say to Mr. Martini is, I know that there are 3 HVAC jobs on my street, and I could give you a concrete measure if we had HVAC training. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can't come without me saying it.
Barbara?
Okay, thank you. It's great to see everyone. Thanks for coming out. Dr. Newton, always good to see you. The questions I had are kind of all related to things that have already been asked, but it gives us a chance to talk even more about our favorite subjects. So I want to continue on the issue of kind of timeline, baseline data, who's going to see what, when, and how, we're going to move this along. There's a lot of great stuff happening. It's really exciting. I mean, just the building of supports for the whole child over the last several years in so many ways. And, we have a lot of great advocates here this evening. It's been a real partnership of all of us, I think, to get where we are. But I think what Ms. Van Doren is getting to in a way is we've been moving along, and we had ways that we were looking at things, and now we have a new strategic plan, which has defined things just a little bit differently. And you're not really starting from scratch because we do have a lot of this data. And I agree, there's a question, and I forget if it's the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that asks, do you have an adult that you can talk to in your school or something like that? So we know those things are there, and I see that, I think Dr. Murphy had just sent us the 90-day plan that you had referred to in your announcements, and you have said in here you're going to define some of these things by June. 2019. So my question then becomes, we've got the Student Services Committee. I see SHAB is coming to speak to us. We've got the partnership. I mean, there's so many different sets of people who can that you all could report to. It doesn't all have to come to us. The first thing I was going to say actually was I would love to have another whole child work session as we did last year, but I have a feeling we won't be able to fit one in for a while. So might there be a way for you to build a plan to put some of this data in front of the eyes of our advisory committees or others, since it may not be the case that we'll be able to see you for a while on this topic?
Yes.
And the Student Advisory Board. They're
Yes.
great kids. They're a great group to
And I think we envision a lot of this coming out through the 90-day updates, as you've just referenced with the table, that gives us information on where we are. And then we are having constant conversations with our advisory groups and with SHAB and several others around this work. So yes, I anticipate, because these are areas of focus, these things guide our conversations with those groups.
So, but I would love, I hope that we can do this as a live monitoring item next year as well. Sometimes we go to briefing reports every other year, but I think this is stuff we love to have you guys come and show us where we are. So thank you for that. I'll try to make these follow-up questions brief. But professional development, the software, the programs that you talked about were actually online, I think. And Mr. Folb is not here, but he's been advocating for flex days, online opportunities, even one day of those 7 or 8 days in August. Could teachers have the opportunity to work, and staff to work at home? Might we be able to build some flex opportunities for staff, with all these online professional learning opportunities?
So that is a human resources and calendar question around policy and our policy implementation procedures. So currently, our staff are able to work remotely when we have our grade reporting days. We have not yet updated to hit some of our professional learning days. I think that is something that we need to be visiting, because it isn't just the Cognito online training as we've been building out this framework. One of the things that you can't really tell from this, but the whole framework is online, are the icons at the bottom indicate whether it's a face-to-face, a blended learning session, or a fully online session, and we have quite a few that are fully online. So right now, we are saying, over the course of the days when we have professional learning, you have about 2 hours to complete the online session. Do it in whatever time frame works for you, but we haven't gotten to the doing it remotely flexible piece yet.
Okay. My overall theme is silos, and it was already raised once. We've got discipline, we've got the stuff you're doing. This is the same kind of thing. We've got professional development, HR. It seems like something we can move forward on. Just talking to the offices next door.
Yeah, well, and I would say that one of the things I want to highlight with this and with the discipline committee work is that those silos are breaking down pretty quickly. I mean, Debbie and several others are on that discipline team, so you will see people repeating, and we're making sure that we have cross-disciplinary groups having all of these conversations, so.
Another one, and I'll just mention these, you probably don't need to have a response, but mentors, something we're very interested in, an important asset. You talked about, getting counselors more involved, but teachers, coaches, they were all mentioned, but this is another silo thing, though, that the teachers need to be encouraged to, I think they do see mentoring as part of their job. Their problem is always that they don't feel they have the time. So same kind of thing. We just need to make sure that messages are going to everyone. You're smiling like this is happening.
We
You
had
want
a great
to tell me
graphic
it's happening.
that actually captured that we took out of the presentation because we were trying to be succinct, but it actually had all of the staff and the ways in which they're interacting to support the child. So we did take that slide out so you can see Pam.
Did you take that out?
We did take it out.
Yeah.
But
No,
there's a great graphic that shows that.
Okay. And my other comment, I was also wanting to get on the internships, the need for an FTE. This is something, I've been on the board, this is my 5th year. We've been talking about expanding internships. We're not going to, Mr. Martini's here working really hard in a lot of ways. We're not going to expand if we don't expand our resources. I think what you're saying is you're looking into it, seeing what we have, and maybe you'll recommend an FTE for our next budget year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, well, I look forward to, yeah. I'll just say what I said again. We've been talking about this a long time, and we need more resources devoted to this. And I guess another piece of it is, I heard you say several times we're looking at sort of internships related to our CTE students, but we have students who are not CTE students. So same thing. I think we have way more students than Mr. Martini can place. It's a big question, and I really hope that we'll. 100% by 2023. Yeah, I really hope that we will think about expanding this program.
Yes, the profile of a graduate is all students, right? We've highlighted some of the CTE pieces, but you are correct, it is all students.
All right, let's continue to talk about that. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I just wanted to follow up on the flexibility for professional learning. And is it your intent that we move to a place where staff would have that kind of flexibility?
So we are working through the professional learning framework to make that a possibility if that's the direction we decided to go to as a school division. So as you see all of these kind of sessions that have been outlined, we are intentionally having some that are face-to-face, some that are blended, and some that are online, so that if we decided collectively as a school division that we wanted that flexibility, we could make that happen.
And
it's not solely my decision, but we are building it out so that could happen.
And how will that decision be made? How and when?
Imagine that would be made with our human resources team and the rest of our leadership team to make a decision about what that might look like.
Okay, and is there a timeline for that?
I don't have a timeline for that, no.
I'm interested in this happening, and so I'd like to at least hear that, we are, or we're not, and why we're not moving towards, that implementing that flexibility.
So, Mr. Goldstein, let me jump
Give
in
me
here
an
for a
idea
second.
when I could ask that question again?
Sure. I think we need to look at education globally in this context, not only for adults, but also for students. And I think we're recognizing the face of education, maybe how we experienced it at a younger age is also changing. So I think we have to recognize that all of these environments are going to be part of our package as we move forward. Building them out though, is going to take some time. So let us get back to you with a timeline. I'd say we're all strong advocates for sort of meeting the various needs of folks, whether it's online, it's face-to-face, or it's in groups. And I think we all have to recognize we learn differently. So we have to offer all of those different venues. And it also gives people a chance with lifestyles, especially today, that some of the alternatives or other options is perhaps that are less traditional than we are accustomed to, provide that flexibility. And I think we have to be attuned to that because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're attracting people to come here to work, that this is an attractive place for them to grow and learn and also serve our community. So let us get back to you with that. But I think I look at that as a continuum and a comprehensive package. It's just not one thing. We can't just be delivering information one way. We've got to look at it across multiple platforms, and I think we recognize that.
Yeah, certainly, and I'm not advocating that it be the one way or the only way. But what I hear is that there's a framework that can include that, but there hasn't been a decision to actually move in that direction, and that's kind of what I'm inquiring about in that timeline.
We'll get back to you, but I think as we like to try and do, be as inclusive as possible and get a variety of different opinions at the table and see how best to meet that need.
Okay, thank you. And other comments? No? And I guess we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming and for your work on this. And we are moving to our 2 action items tonight. And the first is the Education Center reuse schematic design. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Goldstein. You folks saw this at the last meeting. There were some questions and some clarifications, and so I'm going to ask Mr. Chambers to provide a little bit of an update. There were some items that the board raised questions about. I know that you and Mr. Chadwick have addressed those. So if you could sort of walk through that with us, and then I think we're ready to take action on this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Murphy and members of the board. We presented the proposed schematic design as information item on February 7th at the school board meeting. And what we're bringing in front of you tonight is Exhibits A through F are consistent with what we presented, with the exception of these couple of items. In Exhibit E, we have new funding sources proposed for the costs associated with the temporary transportation facility remaining on the site through construction, and a major construction bond funding is subsequently reduced, and the total funding available we're keeping at $37 million or below. And Exhibit F, we did find an error on our A&E estimates, that we had put the same estimate for both the A&E estimate as well as the CMR estimate, and actually the AE estimate was a little bit higher. So we wanted to correct that in the presentation. And I'm just, for a reminder, just quickly go through the fact that the base scope, or the site for the base scope, has remained the same as we had presented. Floor plans, again, the majority of the building will be classroom spaces, which is the blue. The elevations, the building is going to remain pretty much the same in elevation as it looks today. That we were addressing the fact of the lighting and the glare for students with the frit pattern, and trying to keep the shades from being closed because daylight is beneficial as well as views for students. And this is Exhibit E. This is where the modification was made, where you can see the major construction bonds is $36.05 million. Operating has remained the same at $0.75 million, and we have added the additional funding from the MCMM fund of $0.2 million, and it's from basically the relocatable funding that we utilize for that. And the correction that was made on this chart in F is under the A&E. You can see the 0.83 in lieu of the 0.62. So that's the changes that we've made. So any questions anyone has?
Thank you for the presentation. Board members, do you have questions or comments?
Mr. Goldstein, we do have one speaker
Sorry.
first.
Thank you
Mr.
very
James
much.
Schroll.
Thank you. Mr. Schroll is the chair of the PFRC, and you're speaking in that capacity?
Yes, I am.
This evening, and so we'll suspend the 2-minute limit for your comments. We're anxious to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Dr. Murphy, members of the board. For the record, my name is James Schroll, and I am the chair of the Public Facilities Review Committee for the Ed Center project. The PFRC and BLPC met 5 times jointly to consider the schematic design for this project. We also had a site tour and hosted one community meeting as well for this project. Generally, the PFRC expressed support for the base concept, although members of the PFRC would rather see the alternate concept, which includes a multi-use sports court and additional green space. The proposal before you this evening is in alignment with many of the principles of civic design, namely, it aligns with the principle to emphasize respecting historic structures, incorporating energy-efficient design, exploring the adaptive reuse of existing structures, which is obviously happening here, ensuring universal design, and developing, and in this case, kind of maintaining a hierarchy of massing. The proposal, though, is not in complete alignment with all those principles of civic design. It's kind of in the middle on some of the kind of pedestrian bike element, bike principles. I'll get into that in a moment. In terms of the building design that Mr. Chambers just kind of went through, the PFRC overwhelmingly supports the option before you this evening, which is building design option A. Both committees, BLPC and PFRC members, did make some comments at our December 19th meeting that were incorporated into the final design. So we certainly appreciate the architects and staff's efforts to do that. The final design also maintains a kind of historic appearance of the facade, which was guidance from the county board. It's symmetrical, which members appreciated. And so while it does preserve the historic character, it also, with the FRIT design, is able to achieve higher energy efficiency for the new structure. In terms of some of the off-site issues, that's kind of the area of the greatest concern with this project. Members slightly supported the kind of option 1 streetscape improvements, which is before you this evening, which has the pickup and drop-off lane against the curb, then a bike lane, then the travel lane. The bike lane is improved. It's painted green to kind of highlight that. Some members, I will note a minority, but did raise concerns about the conflict with particularly cyclists with the pickup drop-off lane. And those members wanted to see other alternatives that would bring the pickup drop-off on site. And so perhaps something to consider this evening. Before I conclude, I do want to thank staff again for their efforts, particularly in sharing the draft of the proposals, the draft presentations ahead of time. That was kind of different than previous practice, but I want to thank staff for doing that and encourage them to do that in the future. I want to thank Ms. Van Doren for her liaison efforts for this project, and your attendance was greatly appreciated at our meetings. While staff wasn't proposing some of the alternates, it's not proposing the alternate concept design, it's not proposing a bridge, it's not proposing the covered walkway, which the PFRC members sort of recommended. If those things are considered by the board and approved by the board, we would ask that another PFRC, BLPC be held, since many of these concepts weren't really considered by our members. So with that, I want to thank the board for the time tonight to speak to you all, and we look forward to working with staff and the board as we move to use permit this spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mr. Schroll, for bringing us the details and the thinking of the PFRC and the BLPC in this. No more speakers? Board members, do you have comments and questions? Nancy?
So I had sent in a question about the money for the transportation modifications that were the way the building's currently being used. And if you go back to slide 7, I asked how much money that was. And
Oops, went too far.
do I glean from this that it's $200,000?
That is correct. It is $200,000 is what we're looking at. We are actually using an APS relocatables, and we're going to site them at a location where relocatables were on the site prior. And we're looking at utilizing the contractor as to do this work because we believe it'll be cheaper because they're going to have the permits for the site and be able to work through things quicker and get things
This
set up.
money was used to turn that site into a temporary location for the buses?
No, there was
and housing them?
nothing spent from this project currently. This $200,000 is to provide office space and facilities for the bus drivers that will be working out of that station, because we're intending as part of the demolition to remove everything from the inside. It would basically be an unoccupied building, because it's going to be less expensive for us to do that than it is for us to work around them inside. And we also would have to do some things with the county to keep it occupiable, including keeping sprinklers operating, keeping the heating system operating, and doing those types of things.
Okay, I just want to be clear. The $200,000 will be spent to do what?
To provide relocatable facilities for the bus drivers that work off of that site.
Okay, so colleagues, we allocated $37 million to renovate this building for our students. I don't believe that we allocated $200,000 to create office space for our transportation department. We have another pot of money that we were setting aside for renovation of office space, and I don't think that that $200,000 belongs in this project. So I don't think that affects our vote tonight. I just think it gives the project another $200,000 to actually spend focused on student needs. So I'm really confused by how this ends up in this project. But again, to me, it just means that there's almost $36 million worth of funding, $750,000 of which is for the ancillary items that can't be bonded, and $200,000 that I think should not be in here. So I've said it, and I feel very strongly about that because this was supposed to go to classroom space for our students. So.
May I answer that question?
Please, could we get some clarification?
Yes. The amount that will be bonded for this project has gone down by $200,000. The total cost of the project has gone down by $200,000. The reason we're including this $200,000 in here is because we want, and without going over the $37 million, is because we want to be able to add this to the work of the contractor so that we can do the work more quickly and with less expense. So that's why we've included it here, and we haven't gone over the top. And in fact, we've taken it from the budget that we have for relocatables that's been set aside within MCMM for work this summer. So we are actually, in effect, reducing the cost of the project by $200,000. And we would have done that if we didn't want to add this work to the scope of the contractor so we can get it done more quickly and efficiently.
Okay, I'll just say again, this then should be $37.2 million, and I feel very strongly about that. So I'm just, again, I don't think it's going to affect the motion. but I think I understand the notion of creating it, putting it within the contract to be bid out, but that should have been a separate pot of money that coincided with this one. So I don't need to beat a dead horse with this, but it was not what we envisioned in this project. And we have a very tight budget here, and we have items that we've had to leave out that were considered. And I would like to see us deal with that at some point, perhaps not tonight, but I don't know what to do. I don't think it affects the vote that we're going to take.
I need clarity. I need to know if this will affect the vote. So if I vote to accept the schematic design, am I approving a budget alongside with, here's the challenge I have. I agree with Ms. Van Doren. I recognize we're not using the money from the budget. But here's the question or the concern I have. In essence, it is $36.8 million is what our current spending is. So our budget for this project is $37 million. If, as we get closer to the end of the project, we are really truly realizing that $200,000 savings because the project has stayed where it is. We know projects, and while we have soft costs, you still never know. We have the opportunity to perhaps build a canopy or provide the green space that the PFRC recommended. How would that be reflected when the project funding is displayed this way? And so I understand completely the need to put it in this in order for it to be part of the contract bid. That makes perfect sense to me. But how do we as a board monitor the additional $200,000 that we potentially have to then create the Ed Center within budget to the maximum possibility of providing the best quality experience for our students? And that's the question I have. So if I approve this, is there a way to monitor that with the footnote, or do we have to adjust the funding and add a footnote that the budget is still $37 million, but $200,000 will be taken from MCMM funds or relocatable funds or whatever the issue is? So that's my question, and I don't know if anyone has an answer for that this evening.
I think we should get back to you on that one. It probably can be handled with a footnote, but let me consult with Ms. Peterson, and we'll figure out how to do that.
I know this is one of those gray areas. We're voting on a design, that's a budget. So if we vote on the design today, does that have an effect on how we?
Well, I think basically what's presented is, and what has been our direction, was to be 37 million or less. So we still are at 37 million. If the board would elect down the road to add 200,000 or keep it at 37 million, you can still do that. And the MCMM fund is still there, which is what we're using it from. We were just trying to keep it under the 37 million.
And I appreciate it. And again,
which we were directed to do.
Completely understand the need to put it part of the contract, but we need to just know that there is that.
Perhaps it will help if I put this in context. We're at the schematic design phase of the project. We have a great deal more work to do. We have a lot more estimating to do. We're going to have final bids, and there's a lot more work to be done. We may be looking at it from too fine a point of view, maybe not as a matter of principle, but in terms of numbers, we are looking at it in a way that is a little exaggerated at this point.
So with that understanding, just to close out my point, and then with the understanding that we will create clarity as to where that $200,000 is coming from, which is not from the allocated budget to the project, then I'm willing to move forward with considering the approval of the schematic design. I just wanted to provide that for my colleagues so that they know. Thank you.
Barbara.
Could I just weigh in on that? Because, this, correct me if I'm wrong, but every project we do has logistical issues. And this is simply a logistical issue. It's the same as if you're renovating your house and you have to pay someone to, move the furniture into the, or the boom cranes that we had to, there's stuff that you have to pay for in order to work on the project that doesn't actually end up with the project looking nicer, but it's stuff that has to happen to do it. And we have activity right now on that site, and we have to address that.
It's very similar to what we did at Abingdon when we put in the relocatable trailers.
Right, where all the
for
students had to move out into
correct.
relocatables. I mean, there are things that you
The
have to
activity on
address
the
in
site,
order to
correct.
build, and this is a cost of building at that site right now because of the activities we have on that site.
Correct.
Monique?
I'm sorry, I think I need just a little more clarity. So we're spending $200,000 from MCMM for this, but it looks like it's coming out of this project. Is that not true? I'm sorry, I just don't understand. I apologize.
I don't know how to explain it another way.
I can explain it. The budget for this project is $37 million. 200,000 of that project budget is coming from MCMM, but we approved a total project budget of $37 million. So it's just coming from different sources, but they had to stick to that bottom line of our approved budget. That basically.
Yes.
I'm confused about the comment that the bond funding was reduced. Hey, can you give me some clarity on that? You said, I think I heard that the bond funding was reduced by 200,000, and then this MCMM source was 200,000 was found from the MCMM source. Did I hear that right?
Ms. Peterson, may I ask you to perhaps provide a little bit of clarity here? I think it's really beginning to identify the buckets of where the money is coming from, and
Sure.
I think you may be able to provide that clarity.
Sure. In the CIP that was approved last June, there was a $37 million project for the Ed Center that was funded with $32.25 million worth of bonds, $4 million in previous bond funding, so a total of $36.25 million in bonds, and $0.75 million that was earmarked to come from the operating budget. What this does is it reduces the amount of bond funding that will be needed for the project by $0.2 million and replaces it with MCMM funding for the relocatables. That's really all it's doing. I understand Ms. Talento's question about what happens when we get to the end of the project and we need that $200,000 in bond funding for doing some of those alternates that we may not be considering doing now. That funding would be available to the project. And you could, at that point, decide to add $200,000 worth of bond funding to the project to make it work. But as Mr. Chadwick said, we have a long way to go yet before we're at that point, but we're staying at that $37 million right now.
And so why and how was the decision made to reduce the bond funding by 0.2 million and substitute that 0.2 using MCMM funds? I mean, why bother with that substitution?
Because we can't fund the relocatables, the work and the relocatables with bond funding. We've purchased them. The work is to move them and to set them up, and that's what we're asking the contractor to do.
The relocatables for this project?
Right. We already own
Would
the
not
relocatables.
be done from the bond funding.
The $200,000 is to move them and set them up so that they are functioning relocatables for our staff. It's not to purchase them. It's to move them and set them up. So we can't use bond funding for that. We have to use other funds. So we're proposing the MCMM funds be used for that.
Okay, and so I think one of the parts I'm missing here is that if I look at the entire project budget, there's still a contingency in there that's going to help us get from today to September of '21, if
Absolutely.
necessary.
And this doesn't affect the contingency. I think the only thing that Ms. Talento was talking about was when the project comes in and we find that the project, down the road, knock on wood, is under budget, then we have some opportunities available to us to put in some of the things that we're not considering right now for this project. And then that $200,000 comes into play. It would still be available. It would still be there to be used should you choose to use it.
Which would require us to go over 37 million for a total project budget.
Yes, it would.
Right, and we have some verbiage in that motion that we're not going to consider a project design that goes over 37 million.
That is correct.
And that is the argument, Mr. Goldstein, that the 200, so this is the argument. So I fully understand. It makes perfect sense to me. So here's the argument, and I think this is where maybe Ms. Van Doren and I are in agreement, and I'm not sure where my other colleagues are. That's correct, Mr. Goldstein. So when we get to that point, we'll have to replay the segment of this meeting to explain to the public that $200,000 was strictly used not for the development of the project, but because we have used this site temporarily to house transportation staff, which is needed. And that transportation staff is now, those relocatables that is housing and supporting a transportation staff that has nothing to do with the development of the 500 to 600 seats of the Ed Center is going to cost us $200,000 to move. So in essence, wherever those transportation staff support relocatables would be, and we would have to move them, it cost us about that much. It has nothing to do directly with the project. Because we want this contractor to do it, because it's a cost savings to us, we are making it part of the project, which keeps us within budget. So in a year or 2 years, when Mr. Chadwick comes back and says, we have come in under budget X amount of dollars, and we can say, okay, we have $200,000 that were not applied from the money we set aside to maybe add the canopy or do the green space, and that will require us to approve a budget increase of 37.2, $0.2 million, which is $200,000 that was technically used for transportation and not the Ed Center project. And so that's the argument, that it would then really require us to technically increase the budget, but we would not be using $200,000 towards that piece, and that's the challenge that we have right now. And so because of that verbiage that we put in our charge, we are now in a place where we're going to find a challenge with that.
Okay, one more clarification on my part, for me, please. The planned use of the 200,000 is for transportation services, transportation service staff that does not relate to the development of the Ed Center project? But needs to be...
So the transportation staff is currently in the building, using the building.
In the Ed Center?
At the Ed Center.
Yeah.
They will be there through the construction of the project. Through the demolition and the construction of the project, if we have them in the building, there are going to be additional costs that will be added to the project to keep them in there. It's kind of like keeping students in a building. If you're renovating with them in there, you move them around within the space. What we've tried to do, and what made the most sense for the project, was to move them out into relocatables. The buses have to park there because we have no place else to park them. Their facility needs to be there. So we were moving them out of the building, and we are able to take all of the sprinklers out. That big unit, the chiller that's sitting out front, would be able to go away. Because if they remain there, we have to keep the servers in. If the servers are in, then we have to keep the chiller. So we would be heating the building, we'd be cooling the building. If we'd move them out of the building, when we do the demolition, we can, number one, do all of the demolition on the interior at the same time. And number two, we could have the building completely empty and vacated to be able to do our surveying and measurement, which is why we're doing that demolition. And they would be out of the way when construction would start. So essentially, it's going to save the project money by moving them out. The board directed us at the last meeting, you didn't think funds for the project should pay for them, so we found an alternate source through the MCMM fund, and we kept it at this $37 million, which was what, or less, which is what we are charged to do. So that's what we were doing, and I hope that clarifies or helps to answer that question.
And if they had remained in the building, if we had not gone to the relocatable option or idea here for that, what would the resulting costs be? Keeping the chiller, keeping the servers?
Just keeping the
working
chiller
around the
itself,
staff?
I believe, is about $12,000 to $20,000 a month. So
we would be seeing a change in the project budget? There would have to be some value engineering
it's already
to stay under the
incorporated into
37?
that because the contract is going to pay for the chiller as long as it's in operation. It also serves the planetarium, which is currently open. So there are things there's temporary facilities that we have to do with any project like that, and these are part of what we're doing. And we try to find the most cost-effective way to maintain what has to happen on a site while we do a construction project. And that's what we were trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Nancy.
I really would be happy to move on to the motion, but I am going to read something. When we moved to work on this project, the motion was to include renovation of the education center to create 500 to 600 additional high school seats to be completed no later than August 2021 and to be constructed at a maximum cost of $37 million. We did not say that we were funding the interim use of the Ed Center as the site to house the buses or the management staff that would be using that. If we were doing that, I think we might have considered more money for this project. But at the time that we approved this, we did not approve the interim use for bus parking or bus parking management. And now we have incorporated that cost into this project. So we were very deliberate in saying we wanted to keep this under $37 million. And I really do understand all the pressures, and I appreciate all the work that staff is doing to try to maintain these costs. But this was an added cost because without our approval, and as they need to efficiently use space, they put the buses there and the management of it, which added an additional burden to this site that we did not consider when we did this. So that all said, I think we will all revisit this meeting conversation if we get to the point where it's even feasible to consider any alternative. I'd rather get to the motion because all I'm trying to do is say, at this point in APS's life, $200,000 is not a paltry amount of money. If we all considered $200,000 not a paltry amount of money, I think that we would all be focusing correctly in how we have to squeeze every single inch of building out of every single penny we have. And in this instance, we put a very tight cap on this, in which case we must produce seats for these students. And we had some excellent recommendations that you brought forward, and the BLPC and the PFRC wanted us to consider, and reallocating that money to a use that we did not originally approve is something that I would simply like us to consider if it comes back that an alternate is a possibility. That's all.
Right, I understand. I understand. But what I think I'm hearing is that when you look at this project, through a soda straw, you look at it in a vacuum, excuse me, you're absolutely right. We did not approve or contemplate transportation staff services having the buses nearby and then having to manage them. But we need to do that. You widen our viewfinder. We need to do something with those buses. they're going to have to go somewhere. They would have to go somewhere even if they weren't today at the Ed Center, and we would have to be paying for that somewhere, somehow.
Then allocate those funds from that area. Look, I think we're kind of really beating a dead horse, and I get that. So let's let it go. And I just think we have swept into a pot of money that was there.
Okay. Thank you for the
Money, I
lively
think, is-
discussion,
yeah.
everyone. And I think it's time to ask for a motion. Who's got this motion? Monique?
I have a motion. The Arlington School Board's adopted FY 2019-2028 capital improvement plan addressed in part the continued increase in enrollment throughout Arlington County by including a project to renovate the Education Center building at 1426 North Quincy Street to create 500 to 600 additional high school seats. There have been 5 meetings with the Building Level Planning Committee, BLPC, Public Facilities Review Committee, PFRC, members of adjacent civic associations, and other project stakeholders. The school board previously approved the project's educational specifications on December 20th, 2018. The proposed schematic design was presented to the school board by APS staff on February 7th, 2019. Having carefully reviewed the extensive input from the BLPC, PFRC, civic association leaders, and other stakeholders, and the superintendent's recommendation, I move the school board approve the schematic design as generally described in Exhibits A through F in the presentation made at the February 21st, 2019 school board meeting. By approving Exhibits A through F, the school board approves the following aspects of the schematic design. Reaffirm basic project criteria to create 500 to 600 new high school seats to be completed in time for start of school September 2021. Schematic site plan showing general location of features with the understanding that further refinement of the site plan, including additional exploration of proposed off-site improvements, is expected during the use permit review approval process. General layout of program spaces within the building. General approach to existing window replacement, and maximum total project funding of $37 million with strong direction to find opportunities to reduce cost. It should be noted that the FY 2019-2020 CIP funding for the project included $36.05 million funded by bonds, all of which has received voter approval. With this approval, the school board also provides the following direction to staff. Proceed to the design development phase, including preparation of the use permit application. Begin discussions with Arlington County government staff on identifying APS and Arlington County government jointly funded items. Continue its investigation of replacement of fourth floor windows as described on Exhibit F. And pursue various cost-saving measures, using every effort to complete the project for less than the maximum available funding.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And now, I believe Nancy has an amendment. An amended motion.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. I'd like to propose an amendment to the third paragraph. The amendment would read, after the bullet, continue its investigation of replacement of fourth floor windows as described in Exhibit F. I would recommend adding a bullet, continue to consider alternate site improvements for a sport court, canopy, and/or bridge connection if additional funding can be found from savings. And then at the last bullet, pursue various cost-saving measures using every effort to complete the project for less than the maximum available funding and/or reallocate funds to complete alternates if feasible. And then I would, if I may, I'd like to explain if there's a second.
Shirley, is there a second for that amendment?
second.
Thank you. Yeah, would you like to explain your thinking?
Sure. We are in a very tight budget on this, and I know staff is doing a great job, and they have talked about ways in which they may be able to find savings, both particularly the canopy and the outdoor space were of great interest to both the BLPC and the PFRC. They were concerned that in terms of common space, this high school has the least common space, but it will have the most students of any high school in Arlington. So they were quite concerned about that, and they were also concerned by parents and teachers about walking from the Washington, during this use of it, walking from Washington Lee to this building, and perhaps at least part of that walkway could be covered with a canopy. Now, both of those costs are outside the parameters of this project right now. But if there was any way that this comes in under project, this is simply to say, if that were to happen, to consider those two, those actually three, the bridges, was not, it was of interest and there was some conversation, but I'd say the other two were of greater interest, and I've kind of put them in the order that I think I heard consideration of them. But, so I'm just saying, if there was additional money, it could be reallocated to these alternates, still coming in within budget. So that's that's my recommended adjustment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be voting on this first, this amendment. And so, colleagues, do you have further questions on the amendment or comments on it?
Yes, and I apologize ahead of time, but I want to make an amendment to Ms. Van Doren's amendment and make a correction. We actually approved in the motion, it says the funding for the project included $36.05 million funded by bonds, and it actually included $36.25 million funded by bonds. According to our CIP, that is the actual bond that was voted for approval, while I know that it, so that's the amendment, that we just amend the 36.05 to 36.25. And the reason is because in our CIP page, which they included in the PowerPoint, when you add those numbers, it is a total of 36.25. That it says 36.05. Well, the verbiage says. Okay.
There's something, I think it's 36.25. I think that's just a typo. The motion says 36.25, doesn't it, Monique, what you have?
No, it says 36.05. So I don't know if we. So that's what's being used, but what's voted on was 36.25.
It doesn't say that's what we voted on. It says it includes that amount. It actually includes more than that, but that doesn't mean, again, I think we need Ms. Peterson probably to confirm what, and she just.
So I guess that's my question. If this doesn't have any.
Supposed to match the CIP, or is it supposed to be the amount that we're?
That's correct. That's the question.
Approving.
I don't see Ms. Peterson here right now, but
She'll be back momentarily.
yes, I would like her to answer that question.
We could take a break. So let's do that. Let's take a break until Leslie gets back in the room.
Thank you.
So a short break, 5 minutes? And we're back. And we have a question for Leslie. And who wants to repeat the question?
I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and then I chose the wrong moment to leave. I apologize.
Ms. Peterson, oh, do you need us to repeat the question?
I don't believe so. I believe the question centered around the 36.25 million or the 36.05 million. It needs to change to 36.05 million because you won't be using $200,000 of the bond funding. You'll be using MCMM in its place. It's not an issue. What the voters have provided to you is authorization to sell the bonds that you need to sell. In some cases, not many cases, in some cases, we don't always sell everything that the voters authorize because the project hasn't needed us to. So that's not an issue.
Okay.
It should be fine.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that.
So does that wording have to be changed to? No, instead of funding, authorization for the project for 36.05, which, as you said, which is what the voters have provided, because we haven't sold those bonds. We don't actually have the funding.
I think the language is correct. The CIP funding was listed for the project, included 36.05 million in bonds.
So what it reads there is fine?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I remove my amendment from the floor.
Withdraw the amendment?
I withdraw
Okay.
my amendment from the floor.
And
Thank you.
so are there any other comments or questions on Nancy's amendment to the main motion before we go to a vote? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the amendment that Nancy's brought forward to the main motion? Does anybody need that repeated? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. And I believe that now supersedes the main motion.
Now we vote on the motion as amended.
Right. And so are there any comments or questions on the motion as amended before we vote on that?
Yes, sir, I have a question.
Monique.
I just wanted to ask in clarification from Ms. Van Dorn, when you say and/or reallocate funds to complete alternates, if feasible, you mean reallocate, what reallocating?
Within the budget of the project.
Okay, that's kind of what I wanted
Yeah,
to
I
understand.
was going to put that clarification in, but it seemed clear we're staying within 37 million.
I just want to be crystal clear.
Yeah, no, that I meant within 37 million.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe 37.2 million. Okay. 37 million.
All right, don't confuse us. Okay.
Won't get greedy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. On the motion as amended, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And moving on to the second action item. Board will act on the extended day licensing. Dr. Murphy?
I'm going to turn to Ms. Peterson for this item. We brought it last meeting as information. Are there any updates here, Ms. Peterson?
The only update that I would like to point out is that we did add a bullet on the recommendation slide that the ED program will provide a report of its activities to include results from self-monitoring annually to the school board per policy M-7.
Thank you.
That's the last bullet.
That is the last bullet.
It was added since we saw it last time.
Correct. That was added at the request or concern of Ms. Van Dorn.
It's right
Okay,
there.
thank you. Board members, oh, sorry. Do we have speakers? No speakers. And is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Goldstein, I have a motion. With respect to the APS Extended Day Program, I move that the school board elect, as permitted by Virginia Code 63.2-1715A15, not to continue with the Virginia Department of Social Services licensing regime, and instead to establish its own safety and supervisory standards for its extended day programs, which standards will meet or exceed VDSS licensing standards other than any instance where those standards conflict with regulations, policies, and other provisions of law applicable to schools, and with inspection and oversight provided by APS staff.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry, I should have asked if there was discussion before we had the motion, before we vote. Is there any discussion, questions, clarifications by board members? No? We can move right to a vote? Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And now we are at the information items stage, and there are 5 information items tonight. And what I would like to do is combine the presentations for the first 3 items, the proposed revisions to school board policy on graduation and on promotion and on retention. So one presentation after the next, and then we will discuss them all together since there's quite a bit of overlap.
Understood. All right. First
Thank
of all,
you.
thanks and congratulations on School Board Appreciation Week. Thanks for all you do on behalf
Thank you.
of all the students and the adults that support them. We do appreciate it. It's a heavy lift. I couldn't imagine doing it. And especially to Miss Elliott, thank you for all you do. Your warm smile and always got a kind word for people in the mornings. Greatly appreciated. And I'm sure the George Mason community is proud of you as well. All right. So let's go into the policy update with regard to graduation. We've changed some language and updated and regulated the organizational structure of that policy. We've also removed language specific to one school, which is Wakefield High School, was included in the policy, and we have removed that language and instead included all of the requirements for students to have opportunities to experience workplace readiness skills in the PIP. And then we've removed the language specific to individual diploma types, which has also been placed in the PIP. Uh-oh, are they ready for me? Thank you. Okay, the policy update with regard to promotion. There have been no proposed changes to this policy. Okay, so I won't go over the whole thing, okay? And then we'll move to the last one, which is retention. And there have been no proposed changes to this one either. So now I'll open the floor for questions on all 3, graduation, promotion, and retention.
Okay, thank you. Just for my clarification, the last 2, there are no proposed changes. They're here just because it's time to review.
Yeah, they all come together, and we thought it would be wise to consider them all at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Are there speakers? No speakers. Okay. Board members, do you have comments or questions?
I have a question.
Tanya?
I had a question. Is there, are you, I don't know if you're the person to direct this to, but you're giving the
Give it a shot.
presentation, so I apologize. Right, I'm
That's
going to give it a
okay.
shot. Do you know if the policy team noted that the PIP for the graduation promotion policy says PIP promotion and graduation, and even retention is almost an element of promotion. You're either promoted or you're retained, and it all leads to graduation. So I was curious if there was any discussion on that.
That's an excellent question. It was not offered to me. And before I even answer that, let me thank the people who worked on the committee from all the schools across the county. They did a lot of hard work in
we have a
helping
great
us out with this.
policy team.
But we were asked to consider all 3. The option of combining them was not offered to us, but it's open for discussion.
So I don't know if my colleagues agree, so I welcome their feedback, but if I think there's agreement, I think unless there's a very specific reason in alignment with the VSBA policies or anything, I think it would make sense to combine that as a parent and as a person who's looking at policy. It would make sense for all of them to be aligned, so that you're going in one place to find out what happens if you're not promoted and how do you get to graduation. So that's my first comment. My second comment or question is regarding the promotion policy. We note in there that to be promoted to grade 9 from grade 8, a student must have passed 8th grade mathematics, English, science, and world geography. I believe, according to the program of studies for high school, world geography is a high school credit, and it's also not required to graduate. You need a world history or a world geography credit. And so while I understand that we need to have some core subjects for 8th graders to pass, I am concerned about having so specific the world geography. And I know that we offer language in 8th grade, and so I'm curious, this might be a question for teaching and learning, is there a reason that APS recommends in our policy that the requirement for an 8th grader to pass a high school credit course to be promoted?
Well, we sought a waiver from the state some time ago. My apologies for not remembering the year, but to offer world geography as a high school credit-bearing course to 8th graders. We combined civics and economics into a 2-year course for 6th and 7th graders, which freed us up the room to offer that course to 8th graders. It's our only required high school credit-bearing course in middle school. You're accurate. And we find that doing that opens up space in high school. And it's also an opportunity for us to use a more rigorous course and offer it universally. We have a very high success rate with it. My apologies for not having the exact numbers, but we do really well with regard to SOL and pass rate for that class. Students who don't pass it have an opportunity to complete it in summer school, and it was our decision as a county to go in this direction. Were we to change that, we would have to again petition the state and ask for an opportunity not to offer it there.
And so I think I'm not asking to change that. I'm excited and I strongly support that is what we do, but I am asking if a student doesn't pass that course, we are in essence saying you cannot be promoted to 9th grade, where actually if they passed without passing that course, they might have an opportunity to take another course in high school that would still lead them for a path to graduation. So I'm just curious if we are closing a pathway for a student who just might not be doing well in this particular core subject. So I didn't know if that's something for discussion, or I guess I'm asking for recommendation or feedback on, is this really where we have to land, where we are asking an 8th grader? And I know we're not voting on it tonight, so this is the opportunity for this conversation. I think about students who maybe that's not their topic. I don't recall taking world geography, so I have no understanding of the experience they're having. But I understand mathematics, I understand English, I understand science, I understand a history course. So I guess that's my question. Are we required by law to have 4 core subjects and world geography is just the only one that we offer? Is that where we are?
We'll have to go back and look at that as I review it, because that is our core social studies class for 8th grade. That's why it's listed as that course. I was actually just flipping through the PIP because there is something in the PIP around and I just can't find it in this, but I'll find it for you. If the students do not pass one of those classes, there are options. And so that's in the PIP. I just have to find it.
I remember reading
I know I
that.
read it at some point in preparation, but it is because it's one of the 4 courses, and that is what we have as our core social studies class in 8th grade.
So in the future, if we added another social studies class in the 8th grade, they would then have an opportunity to not take world geo, but take another civics course in the 8th grade.
I would think so, yes.
Then that would count, then they would be promoted to 9th grade.
Yes, we would have to work with VDOE on that because they've approved the sequence that we currently have. But yes, we could
I see.
present that as an
So
option.
the World Geo is a very specifically approved class. So
Yes.
even if we offered an alternative class, like just a 8th grade civics class, whatever that would be called, even if they passed that class, we wouldn't be able to promote them unless we got BODE approval for that other class?
We would have to look at our sequence of courses, not approval for them to move on to high school. That's not what we're asking for. We would have to speak to VDOE about the sequence of our social studies courses. So we have, as Mr. Byrd was explaining, special permission, a waiver, whatever it might be, to do some combining of courses in 6th and 7th grade so that we could do World Geo in 8th. If we were to change that, it would probably shift that course sequence. Maybe we just add something to it, but that's something we can take back to Carrie Hirsch, our supervisor, and see what her thoughts are on that
And so,
around social studies.
I guess, so from a policymaker perspective, what I'm thinking is, would it work to say 8th grade mathematics, English, science, and a civics course, or whatever the label, the general label is it social studies?
It could say social studies, maybe
Because
math,
if we say
English,
social
science,
studies,
and
while
social
we
studies.
only offer World Geo today, it doesn't
anything.
prevent us from offering something later, and in policy, you want that. And then in our PIP, if we say we currently only offer World Geo, and that is an 8th grade course you have to pass, that then makes sense, right?
'Cause
So
we have
that
the
would be
flexibility,
my feedback in changing this to 8th grade mathematics, English, science, and social
Social
studies.
studies. Yep, that makes sense. We
And
can
then
take that back to the review team before
Then I
action.
could, that works for me, and I thank you for the explanation. When I was reading it, it all makes sense on that. So thank you. And I think those are the only questions I have right now.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding now that these information items 1, 2, and 3 were not reviewed first by the school board subcommittee on policies. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We
Okay,
did not.
so why don't we do
I-
that
is that-
first? Why don't we have them reviewed so that these kinds of questions can be aired and answered, and then when that's done, we can review them as information items. Then, the majority of the board will have already seen that. We can cut down on discussion and comment, especially at a late hour. And so I'm going to recommend that we do that at this point. Good, thank you.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Will that have any effect on, I'm just curious, is there a timing issue here at all?
Yeah, I should ask if any of these are time urgent.
I mean, not on our end. I think we're working through the school board policy calendar that's been developed. So if you wanted to delay this, we can take it back to Ms. Burgos, who is working through this process, and bring it back at a later time.
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of, the subcommittee structure, that somebody takes a look at it first, and when it comes here, a bunch of these initial questions and issues are already worked out. Did you have a comment before we move on?
I did, and I know that we're not going to be using this time to go through this more thoroughly, but I just wanted to say that I do have a concern about the PIP as suggested around the graduation policy. And the concern is that we have to have people opt out of having their course and grade for middle school courses included in their final high school records transcript by, I think, the middle of their junior year. So that the timing is a concern.
The end of their junior year.
Oh, is it the end of their junior year? Yes. So I'm just concerned about that.
Okay.
So if we can think about a creative way to give people more time to determine whether or not they want to include that, that would be helpful.
And it sounds like the substance of this is really that one policy, because there are no proposed changes in the other two, but having the school board subcommittee review this first, I think will be helpful.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
So
thank you for your time.
Thank you. So I guess we'll move on to information item G4, and Tanya's going to present this item, proposed revisions to the 3 school board policies and a proposed new board policy. Tanya?
Do you want me to come, okay. Get the clicker. Sure. Thank you.
It's only one slide. Just put it up.
All right. So just to give some background, the School Board Policy Subcommittee was formed this year with a very focused purpose in the beginning to review the school board policies. All policies are school board policies, but these policies are specifically related to school board work and how the school board governs. So we have taken on that work, and we started with these 4 policies. Well, actually 3 policies: school board policy B-2, school board policy B-2.31, members, and school board policy B-2.32, conduct. I'll come back to this slide in a moment. When we were reviewing these policies, we wanted to make sure that they were aligned to current APS practices. We did use the Virginia School Board Association's policy models, which we are now working with. And we had a policy implementation plan for one of the policies, which didn't make sense to us because policy implementation plans are generally used by staff, and this is actually board governance. So we incorporated the policy implementation plan into the policy, and then we made sure that our policies correctly referenced and aligned with the Code of Virginia. In that work, we'll go back to this slide. You'll note policy B-2 was split into 2 policies because we recognized that our section on meetings really did not have the kind of detail that the VSBA policies did, and we believe that detail was important to understand the work of the board. So we then split B-2 and created a second policy that was specifically focused on meetings and really delineates closed meetings and so forth. If anyone is interested in the work, the marked and clean versions are on board docs. So I'm happy to take any questions regarding these policies from my colleagues or any clarifications from members on the policy subcommittee.
Thank you. Speakers? No. Board members? Do you have comments or questions? Okay. I guess we're moving on. Thank you very much. And this will come back to us at our next regular school board meeting, which is March 14th. And if there are no comments or speakers or anything like that, I would see this on consent. And our final item is the Education Center Reuse Contract Award for Interior Demolition. Dr. Murphy?
Yes, this was added to the agenda, so thank you. And it's timely because of the work that's being done at the Ed Center site. So I'll turn to Mr. Chambers to review this one.
Good evening again. This is with This is with regard to an early release work package for the Ed Center. Just as a follow-up or a reminder, on September 6th, the board approved a construction manager at risk contract for the Phase 1 pre-construction services to the MCN Build Incorporated. We are recommending proceeding with an early release package for the demolition and asbestos abatement prior to the agreed Phase 2 construction services contract that we typically do with the CMR. The early release work will provide additional detail of existing conditions. I think I had mentioned before we're looking at doing a survey of the structure of the building to minimize unforeseen conditions during construction. The actual Phase 2 construction services contract, the full contract, would be expected in the fall of 2019. The contract for the early release work follows the guidelines provided by the Virginia Department of General Services and was reviewed by APS's legal counsel. The proposed contract award was competitively bid by MCN Build through several subcontractors. Based on the reconciled schematic design phase costs, the proposed contract award is within the funding proposed for the project. And work would begin in March or April, and that's dependent upon the county giving us the required approval of the permits. We would make the recommendation as that the funding is within, current funding is approved by the board and no change order is in the funding, change in funding is necessary. To approve the early release construction work package contract for the abatement of an interior demolition in the amount of $2,199,628 to MCN Build Incorporated, and to approve owner construction contingency of $400,000 for use during the abatement and interior demolition phase for additional work that may be uncovered as we do the demolition and abatement.
Super. Thank you. Speakers? No speakers? Okay. Questions? Nancy?
Since this was accelerated, I just wanted to know how accelerated it needs to be. Is it something that we've already approved the schematic design, we already know we're going to do the work. I understand that this allows you to get into the building and do the schematic design even more accurately since you don't really know what's underneath those walls.
Mm-hmm.
So is this something that will wait for the next meeting, or is it something that I just, since you accelerated it, I'm asking the question.
I think what I mean by accelerating was it wasn't on the original agenda, and so I think we populated it on the agenda this week. So I think we want to go ahead and follow the info action process, and even though this may be able to be on consent, I think that still works for the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Consent on the 14th? Okay. Okay. Other questions? Board members, no? Okay. So I guess we're looking forward to this on the 14th.
For consent.
On consent.
Okay.
Assuming there's no other,
Correct.
Comment or hiccups or anything with it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So we're going to act on this. Yeah, this is the 14th. And so now we're at new business. Board members, do you have any new business? Hearing none. You want to think of something? All right, you want to take a break while you think of something? And maybe we can be here until 1 o'clock. All right, hearing none. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.